They laughed when Alpha King Kael Draven threw me out like trash, called me weak, broken, a mistake of the moon herself. But what they didn't know, what he didn't know, was that my weakness was a lie, a seal. An exile was the key that would crack it wide open. This is the story of how I went from the girl they mocked in the Great Hall to the force that brought an entire kingdom to its knees. I'm Elyra Voss, and this is how I turned rejection into a crown no one could take from me. If you want to see how a broken outcast becomes unstoppable, stay until the end. Drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The Great Hall stank of wet fur and arrogance. Elyra stood in the center of the stone floor, barefoot, her thin dress doing nothing against the cold that seeped up from the ancient rock. Around her, hundreds of wolves, shifters in human skin, pressed close, their eyes gleaming with hunger for spectacle. The torches threw jagged shadows across their faces, and she could hear the whispers crawling through the crowd like insects. Weak, defective, no wolf at all. She kept her chin up, barely. Her hands trembled at her sides, and she hated herself for it. Not for being afraid, fear was human, and she'd learned to live with it, but for letting them see it, for giving them one more reason to tear her apart. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a platform of black stone, sat Alpha King Kael Draven. He looked like something carved from winter itself. Sharp jaw, ice-gray eyes, shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of 10 territories. His dark hair was tied back with a leather cord, and his expression was unreadable. Cold, distant, like she was a problem on parchment, not a person standing 10 feet away. He hadn't looked at her once since she'd been dragged in. Beside him stood Seren Vale, his beta and closest advisor. Seren was smaller, sharper, with a smile that never reached her eyes, and a voice like honey poured over glass. She leaned close to Kael, whispering something Elyra couldn't hear. Whatever it was, Kael's jaw tightened, and his fingers drummed once against the armrest of his chair. Elyra had seen Seren around the stronghold for years. Everyone knew her story, orphaned young, taken in by the previous Alpha, trained alongside Kael since childhood. She was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to him. Some said she loved him, others said she just loved power. Elyra suspected it was both. Silence. His voice cut through the hall like a blade through bone. The crowd obeyed instantly. Even the torches seemed to burn quieter. Elyra's breath hitched. She'd heard that voice before. Only once, 3 weeks ago, when the council had announced the pairing. She'd been so nervous she'd dropped the ceremonial cup. He'd just stared at her, expressionless, while someone else cleaned up the wine. Kael stood. The movement was slow, deliberate. Every eye in the room locked onto him. He was the kind of man who commanded gravity itself. When he moved, the world adjusted around him. "Elyra Voss," he said. His voice was flat, empty, like he was reading from a script he'd already forgotten. "You were brought before me under the old law. As is tradition, I have tested your blood, your strength, your wolf." Elyra's throat went dry. She knew what was coming. Everyone knew. The whole kingdom had been talking about it for days. The broken girl who couldn't shift. The defective mate matched to the most powerful alpha in 5 territories. The tests had been brutal. 3 days of rituals, examinations, humiliations. They'd cut her palm and tested her blood. It ran red like anyone else's, but it didn't carry the scent markers that identified Pack. They'd forced her into the shifting circle under the full moon and watched as nothing happened. No transformation. No pain. Just her, standing there in her bare feet while the elders shook their heads. "You have none." The words landed like stones. No shift, no scent, no bond to the moon. Kael's eyes finally met hers, and there was nothing in them. No pity, no hesitation, not even disgust. Just absence, like she wasn't worth the energy of feeling anything at all. "You are not one of us." Someone in the crowd laughed. It started small, a single voice, sharp and cruel, but it spread fast, rolling through the hall like a sickness. Soon dozens were laughing, some outright howling. A woman near the front slapped her knee. A man in the back shouted something Elyra couldn't make out, but the tone was enough. Elyra's face burned. Her nails bit into her palms hard enough to draw blood. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but her legs wouldn't move. You were matched to me by the council, Kael continued, his voice cutting through the noise again. A mistake I will not carry forward. The council. Those ancient, decrepit wolves who claimed to speak for the moon herself. They'd appeared at Elyra's door 6 weeks ago with their scrolls and their pronouncements. You have been chosen, they'd said, blessed by fate to stand beside the Alpha King. She'd thought it was a joke at first, then she'd seen their faces. It wasn't a joke. It was a nightmare. Seren stepped closer to Kael, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Possessive. Proud. She tilted her head just enough to catch the light, her smile widening. Elyra had seen that smile before. It was the same one Serene wore when she'd accidentally spilled hot tea on Elyra's only good dress the week before. The same one she wore when she'd made sure Elyra was assigned the worst tasks in the stronghold, scrubbing floors, emptying chamber pots, hauling water from the frozen well. I, Alpha King Kael Draven, reject you as mate, as wolf, as kin. His words were mechanical, practiced, like he'd rehearsed them in a mirror. You are cast out, exiled to the northern frontier. You will leave before dawn. The hall erupted. Cheers, jeers, shouts of approval. Someone threw something, a bone maybe, or a piece of bread, and it skittered across the floor near her feet. Another person spat. The glob of saliva landed inches from her toes. Finally! About time! Send her to the wolves. Oh, wait, she's not even good enough for that. The voices blurred together. Elyra felt like she was underwater, drowning in sound. She opened her mouth to speak, to say what she didn't know. Maybe to beg. Maybe to scream. Maybe to tell them all that she'd never asked for this, never wanted to be matched to him, never pretended to be something she wasn't. But no sound came out. Her voice had abandoned her, just like everything else. Kael had already turned away. He sank back into his chair, one hand waving dismissively, like she was a servant who'd overstayed her welcome. Seren leaned in close to him again, her lips moving against his ear. Whatever she said made him nod. Seren's eyes found Elyra's across the hall, and she smiled. It was the kind of smile a snake gives before it strikes, slow, satisfied, victorious. Take her to the border, Kael said to the guards without looking up. Make sure she doesn't come back. 2 massive hands clamped down on Elyra's shoulders. She was dragged backward, her feet scraping against the stone. The crowd parted for her like she was diseased. Some spat. Others just stared, their faces twisted with contempt or pity. She couldn't tell which was worse. One voice stood out from the rest. A young man, maybe 19, his face flushed with drink and his shirt stained with ale. Bet she doesn't last a week out there, he shouted, his words slurring together. His friends roared with laughter. 3 days, another voice called back. I'll put silver on 3 days. 2 days, someone else chimed in. She looks half dead already. More laughter, louder now, crueler. Elyra twisted in the guard's grip, her eyes finding Kael one last time. He was already leaning toward Seren, listening to whatever poison she was whispering in his ear. His face was relaxed now, almost bored. He didn't look back, didn't flinch, didn't care. And something inside Elyra, something she hadn't known was there, hardened into stone. What? The guards dragged her through the corridors like a sack of grain. They didn't speak to her, didn't look at her. She was nothing now. Less than nothing. Just a problem to be disposed of. They threw her into a holding cell, a stone room barely big enough to lie down in, with a single barred window that let in the freezing night air. The door slammed shut behind her with a clang that echoed through her bones. Elyra stood there for a moment, staring at the door. Then her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the floor. She didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago. Instead, she just sat there, her back against the wall, and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. She'd been born in the stronghold. Her mother had died giving birth to her. Complications, they said. Her father had lasted another 3 years before a hunting accident took him too. After that, she'd been raised by the pack. Or rather, she'd been tolerated by the pack. No one had wanted her. She was the girl who couldn't shift. The one who didn't smell right. The one who made the elders uncomfortable because she existed outside the natural order. She'd spent her whole life trying to prove she belonged. Worked harder than anyone. Learned every skill they'd let her learn. Kept her head down, her mouth shut, her hopes small. And for what? To be dragged into the great hall and humiliated in front of everyone she'd ever known. To be rejected by a man she'd never even spoken to. To be thrown out into the wilderness to die. Elyra pressed her forehead against her knees and tried to breathe. Hours passed. Maybe days. She couldn't tell. The cell had no light except what came through the window, and the sky outside was black. Finally, the door opened. A guard stepped in. Not one of the twins from earlier. This one was older, graying at the temples, with a scar that ran from his eyebrow to his chin. "Up," he said. Elyra stood. Her legs shook. The guard tossed something at her feet. A bundle of cloth. She picked it up. It was a cloak, thin, patched, but better than nothing. "Put it on," he said. "We leave in 10 minutes. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice came out as a rasp. "Where do you think?" He didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Elyra wrapped the cloak around her shoulders and followed. The ride to the border was silent except for the wind. They didn't bind her hands, didn't gag her. There was no point. Where would she run? The frontier was a death sentence all on its own. The guards knew it. She knew it. Everyone knew it. The two men flanking her were twins, Rafe and Carrick. She'd seen them around the stronghold before. They were enforcers, the kind who broke bones first and asked questions never. Rafe had a scar that split his lip. Carrick's nose had been broken so many times it sat crooked on his face. Neither of them spoke to her. They didn't even look at her. She was cargo, less than cargo. They rode for hours. The landscape shifted from rolling hills to jagged rock to dense, choking forest. The trees here were wrong, twisted. Their bark was black, their branches bare even though it was supposed to be spring. The air smelled like rot and old smoke. Elyra had heard stories about the frontier. Everyone had. It was where they sent the rogues, the traitors, the ones too dangerous or too broken to keep around. Most didn't last a month. The cold got them, or the starvation, or the things that lived in the deep woods, creatures that weren't quite wolf and weren't quite anything else. When they finally stopped, the sun was barely a smear of red on the horizon. "This is it," Rafe said. He dismounted, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. Elyra slid off the horse, her legs shaking. She'd never ridden for that long before. Her thighs screamed in protest, and her lower back felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. Carrick threw something at her feet. A pair of boots. Old, cracked leather, too big by at least 2 sizes. "Charity," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel scraped over metal. "Won't do you much good, but at least you won't die in the first hour." "Generous," Elyra said quietly. She hated how small her voice sounded. Rafe snorted. "Don't mistake pity for kindness, girl. If it were up to me, we'd have left you barefoot." "Why didn't you?" He didn't answer, just swung back onto his horse, his movements practiced and fluid. Carrick lingered for a moment, his eyes scanning the tree line. He looked uneasy. His hand rested on the hilt of the knife at his belt. "Word of advice," he said, his voice lower now. "Don't go deeper into the forest. Stay near the edge, scavenge what you can, might buy you a few extra days." "Why do you care?" Elyra asked. She wasn't trying to be confrontational. She genuinely didn't understand. Carrick shrugged. "I don't. But I've got a sister about your age. Can't help thinking—" He trailed off, shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You're not her. Good luck, little nothing." They rode off without looking back, their horses kicking up sprays of snow. Elyra stood there until the sound of hooves faded completely. Then she looked down at the boots. They were battered and worn, the leather cracked in places, the soles thin enough that she could feel every pebble through them. But they were still better than the flimsy slippers she'd been wearing. She picked them up, slid them on. They were too big, but she stuffed the toes with moss and tied the laces as tight as they would go. Then she turned toward the forest, and she walked. The dead forest swallowed her whole. The trees were packed so tight she could barely see the sky. What little light remained was filtered through a canopy of skeletal branches, casting everything in shades of gray and black. The ground was uneven, roots like gnarled fingers, rocks that jutted up at odd angles, patches of ice that sent her sprawling more than once. She walked until her legs gave out. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each one burning her lungs. Her feet throbbed. Blisters had already formed on her heels, and she could feel wetness inside the boots that was probably blood. She tried to keep going, forced herself to stand, but her body refused. Her vision swam. Her knees buckled. She collapsed face first into the snow. For a long time, she just lay there. She couldn't move, couldn't think. Her body was shutting down, piece by piece. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends. Maybe it was better this way. Quick, clean, no more struggling, no more pretending she could survive in a world that didn't want her. But then, warmth started in her chest. Faint. Almost nothing. Like a single ember buried under ash. But it grew, spread. By the time she managed to lift her head, her fingers were glowing faintly, silver light leaking from beneath her skin like liquid starlight. She stared at her hands, too exhausted to be afraid, too confused to understand. What? The word came out as a croak. The light pulsed once, twice, then faded, leaving only warmth behind. But the warmth stayed, spread through her limbs, pushed back the cold. Elyra forced herself to stand. Her body screamed in protest, muscles seizing, bones aching, but she ignored it. She had to move, had to find shelter. There was a cave nearby. She didn't know how she knew. She just did. Like she could feel it, smell it, sense it in a way that had nothing to do with her eyes or ears. She stumbled toward it, her boots crunching through the snow. Every step was agony. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. But she kept going. The cave was small, barely big enough for her to lie down in. The entrance was half hidden behind a fallen tree, and the inside smelled like damp stone and old death. Inside she found bones, old ones, picked clean by scavengers, and a pool of water near the back that hadn't frozen over. She crawled to the pool and drank until her stomach hurt. The water was cold enough to make her teeth ache, but it was clean, fresh. It tasted like minerals and stone. When she was done, she collapsed against the cave wall. Her whole body was shaking. Her vision kept blurring at the edges. She closed her eyes and slept. The dreams came that night. She was standing in a field of ash. The sky above was black, starless, but the ground glowed faintly, silver light pulsing beneath the surface like a heartbeat. In the center of the field stood a woman. She was tall, impossibly so, her body wrapped in flames that didn't burn. Her hair was long and white, floating around her like smoke. Her eyes were the same color as Elyra's, pale green, like sea glass held up to the sun. "You were never broken," the woman said. Her voice echoed, layered, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. "You were sealed." Elyra tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come. Her throat felt tight, like invisible hands were wrapped around it. The woman stepped closer. The flames around her flickered, and Elyra could see scars beneath them. Old wounds, deep and jagged, carved into the woman's skin like words in a dead language. "They feared what you could become," the woman continued. "So they buried me. Buried us. Locked away the power that runs in your blood because they knew, if you ever woke, you would eclipse them all." "Who are you?" Elyra managed to whisper. The woman reached out, her hand passing through Elyra's chest like smoke. Elyra gasped. Her whole body seized, light flooding her veins, burning and freezing all at once. She could feel something moving inside her, something ancient, something vast, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. "I am what they tried to bury," the woman said. "I am the power your ancestors locked away. I am the fire they feared, and now you will make them remember." The woman's hand twisted and Elyra screamed. Light exploded out of her, silver and blinding, and the field of ash erupted into flames. When Elyra woke, she was gasping for air. Her whole body was slick with sweat despite the cold. And her hands were glowing, brighter than before, bright enough to light up the entire cave. The walls around her were scorched black where her palms had pressed against the stone while she slept. She stared at the marks, at her hands, at the silver light still pulsing beneath her skin. She didn't scream, didn't panic. She just sat there, breathing hard, and thought, "Good. Found." The first week was survival in its rawest form. Elyra learned to hunt by necessity. Her body was weak, too weak. She had no claws, no fangs, no supernatural speed, but her instincts were sharp, sharper than they should have been. She could feel the rabbits in their burrows before she saw them, could hear the deer moving through the trees a mile away, could sense the foxes circling her camp at night, trying to decide if she was prey. Her kills weren't clean. She had no weapons except rocks and desperation. The first rabbit she caught, she had to chase it through the snow until it collapsed from exhaustion. Then she had to beat it to death with a stone. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. Blood soaked into the snow, bright red against white. She cried while she skinned it. Not because she felt guilty, she was too hungry for that, but because she didn't know what she was doing. She ruined half the meat trying to get the pelt off. Her hands were clumsy, shaking, covered in blood and fur. But she ate. She roasted the meat over a fire she built from scratch, striking rocks together until sparks caught on dry moss. The rabbit was gamey and tough, and she burned it badly. But it was food, and she survived. The second day, she caught nothing. Spent hours tracking a deer only to lose it in the thick underbrush. Came back to her cave empty-handed and exhausted. The third day, she caught 2 rabbits, figured out how to skin them properly, learned which parts were edible and which weren't. By the 5th day, she'd built traps, simple ones, snares made from vines and deadfalls made from balanced rocks. They didn't always work, but when they did, she ate well. She was learning, adapting, becoming something she'd never been before. The second week, the storms came. Blizzards that turned the world white. Wind that knocked her off her feet and sent her tumbling into snowdrifts so deep she had to claw her way out, gasping and choking. Cold so deep it felt like her bones would shatter if she moved too fast. The first storm caught her away from the cave. She was checking her traps when the sky turned black and the wind picked up. Within minutes, she couldn't see more than a few feet in front of her. She tried to make it back to the cave, got turned around, lost her bearings completely. She should have died. Instead, the silver fire came again. It erupted from her skin in waves, melting the snow around her, keeping her warm when nothing else could. She didn't understand it, didn't know how to control it. Sometimes it came when she needed it, sometimes it didn't. Once it flared so hot she burned a hole clean through the side of the cave. The stone hissed and cracked, glowing red-hot for hours afterward. Another time, she woke up covered in frost because the fire hadn't come at all. It was unpredictable, dangerous, but it kept her alive. She started experimenting, carefully. If she focused, really focused, cleared her mind of everything except the warmth in her chest, she could make the fire appear in her hands. Small flames at first, flickering and weak, then larger ones. Steady, controlled. She practiced shaping it, bending it, sending it out in controlled bursts. She learned that anger made it wild, fear made it unstable, but calm determination made it sharp. It was exhausting. Every time she used it, she felt drained, like something vital was being pulled out of her. She'd collapse afterward, too tired to move, and sleep for hours. But she kept at it. Because if this was the only weapon she had, she was going to learn how to use it. By the 3rd week, she stopped being afraid. She was sitting by the fire she'd built, without flint now, just her hands, when she heard the growl. It came from the shadows beyond the trees, low, guttural, the kind of sound that raised every hair on the back of her neck and sent her pulse racing. Elyra stood slowly, her heart pounding. She didn't have a weapon. Nothing but her hands and the fire burning inside her. A wolf stepped into the light. It was massive, bigger than any wolf she'd seen, bigger even than the shifters in their animal forms back at the stronghold. Black fur, yellow eyes that glowed like coins in the firelight. Scars crisscrossed its muzzle, and one of its ears was torn half off. Its ribs showed through its fur. It was starving. It was a rogue. Exiled, like her, probably mad with hunger, definitely dangerous. It bared its teeth. Saliva dripped from its jaws, freezing in the air before it hit the ground. Elyra didn't run. She'd learned that running only made predators chase. Instead, she met its eyes, held its gaze without flinching, and felt something shift inside her. The silver fire flared, not in her hands this time, everywhere. Her whole body lit up like a torch, bright enough to turn night into day. The wolf froze mid-step, its ears flattened, its growl cut off mid-breath. It took a step back, then stopped, confused. Elyra's breath caught in her throat. She didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there, glowing, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The wolf took a tentative step forward, then another. It sniffed the air, its nose twitching. Its yellow eyes never left hers. Then, slowly, so slowly Elyra almost thought she imagined it, it lowered its head. Submission. Elyra's mind reeled. Wolves didn't submit to humans. especially not rogues, especially not to someone like her, someone with no scent, no pack, no power. Except she did have power now, didn't she? The wolf stepped closer, close enough that she could feel its breath, hot and rank. It sniffed her hand, nudged it with its nose. Then it lay down at her feet. Elyra stared at it for a long time. Her whole body was shaking, from adrenaline, from fear, from something she couldn't name. Slowly, carefully, she sat down beside it. Her hand hovered over its head for a moment. Then she touched its fur. It was coarse, matted with dirt and old blood and ice. The wolf didn't move, didn't growl, just lay there, its eyes half closed. "Guess we're both outcasts now," Elyra whispered. The wolf huffed. It almost sounded like agreement. She decided to call him Ash, for the field of ash in her dreams, for the way his fur looked in the firelight, for the life she was burning away to become something new. The fourth week, everything changed. Elyra started to train, not with weapons, not with strategy, with power. She'd learned that the silver fire responded to her emotions, but emotions were messy, unpredictable. She needed precision, so she practiced. Every morning, she woke before dawn and worked until her hands bled. She learned to summon the fire without anger, without fear. Learned to shape it into forms, spheres, blades, shields. Learned to send it out in controlled arcs that could slice through tree trunks like they were made of paper. Ash watched her. Sometimes he joined in, circling her, forcing her to track his movements, to anticipate his attacks. He was fast, faster than she could follow at first. But she got better. He taught her how to move, how to use her smaller size as an advantage, how to strike fast and hard and without hesitation. He was a better teacher than anyone back at the stronghold had ever been, and he never looked at her like she was broken. One morning, she woke to find 3 dead rabbits laid out near the entrance to the cave. Ash was sitting beside them, looking smug, his tail wagging slowly. "Thanks," Elyra said. Her voice was rough from disuse. She didn't talk much anymore. There was no one to talk to except Ash, and he didn't need words. He wagged his tail once, deliberately. She laughed, actually laughed. It felt strange, foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak, but it felt good. By the end of the first month, Elyra barely recognized herself. She caught her reflection in the frozen pool one morning and stopped cold. Her eyes glowed faintly, even in daylight, a soft silver sheen that never quite faded. Her skin shimmered when the fire was close to the surface, like she'd been dusted with crushed diamonds. Her hair had grown longer, wild and tangled, streaked with white that definitely hadn't been there before. She looked feral, dangerous, alive. Her body had changed too. The softness was gone, replaced by lean muscle. Her hands were calloused and scarred. Her face was thinner, harder, all sharp angles and shadows. The girl who'd been dragged out of the Great Hall, the one who'd been too scared to speak, too broken to fight back, was gone. And in her place stood someone who would make them all remember her name. The message came on a frozen wind. Elyra was sitting by the fire, sharpening a stick into a makeshift spear, when she felt it. A pull, sharp and sudden, like a hook buried in her chest. She stood. Ash's ears pricked up. He growled low, his hackles rising. "What is it?" she asked. The wind shifted, and with it came voices. Faint, desperate, carried from somewhere far to the south. The stronghold, under attack. Kael's forces, failing. Warlords from the east, they've breached the outer walls. We're losing. We need everyone. Elyra's jaw tightened. Her fingers curled into fists, silver light flickering between her knuckles. They were calling for help. The same people who'd thrown her away like garbage. The same king who'd rejected her in front of hundreds without a second thought. The same crowd that had laughed and spat and placed bets on how quickly she'd die. She should have ignored it, should have let them burn, should have stayed in the frontier and built a life where no one could ever hurt her again. But something in her chest twisted. Not pity, not forgiveness, opportunity. She looked at Ash. His yellow eyes gleamed in the firelight, intelligent and knowing. "We're going back," she said. Her voice was steady, cold, nothing like the girl who'd left. Ash tilted his head, ears forward. Elyra turned toward the south, toward the kingdom that had cast her out, toward the man who'd looked at her like she was nothing, and she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't forgiving or gentle or anything remotely human. It was the smile of a predator who'd just scented blood. Let's see if they still think I'm weak. The journey south took 3 days. 3 days of pushing through snow that came up to her knees, of sleeping in hollow trees with ash curled against her for warmth, of rationing the dried meat she'd prepared because she didn't know when she'd eat again. 3 days of her body screaming at her to stop, to rest, to give up. 3 days of ignoring it. The landscape changed as they traveled. The twisted black trees of the frontier gave way to healthier forest, pines and oaks that still had their needles and leaves. The air grew warmer, less hostile, almost welcoming. Elyra hated it. She'd grown used to the harshness. The frontier didn't lie to you. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It was brutal and honest, and if you survived, you earned it. This forest, with its gentle slopes and birdsong and patches of wildflowers breaking through the snow, it felt like a trap, like the world was trying to lull her into forgetting what she'd become. She wouldn't forget. On the second day, they crossed paths with a hunting party. Elyra heard them before she saw them. Voices carried on the wind, rough laughter, the jingle of tack and weapons. She motioned for Ash to stay low and crept forward through the underbrush, her movements silent. The frontier had taught her how to move like a ghost. There were 5 of them. Wolves from one of the border packs, judging by the markings on their cloaks, red slashes across gray fabric. They'd made camp in a clearing, a fire burning between them, a deer carcass strung up and half butchered. Blood dripped from the meat into the snow, steaming. "Should have brought more ale," one of them was saying. He was young, barely out of his teens, with a baby face and hands that looked too soft for real work. His voice had that whining quality of someone who'd never been told no. "Should have brought fewer complaints," another shot back. This one was older, scarred, with gray threading through his beard. He had the look of a man who'd seen too many winters and survived them all through sheer stubbornness. "We're not here to get drunk, Finn. We're here to patrol." "Patrol for what?" Finn asked, poking at the fire with a stick. Sparks flew up. "Nothing's out here except rabbits and regrets." The older man, clearly the leader, didn't answer immediately. He was staring into the fire, his expression dark, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. "You heard the rumors same as me," a third voice said. A woman this time, lean and sharp-eyed, with a bow across her lap and arrows that looked like they'd seen recent use. "Warlords from the east. They hit 3 settlements already, burned them to the ground." "That's 100 miles from here," Finn said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Was 100 miles," the woman corrected, her fingers running along the fletching of an arrow. "Last report put them at 70, moving fast, organized, not like the raiding parties we're used to." "The king will handle it," Finn said, but he didn't sound convinced. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself. The leader spat into the fire. The saliva hissed against the flames. "The king's got his hands full. Half the packs are refusing to send reinforcements. They don't trust him anymore, not after—" He cut himself off, glancing at the others. The woman's eyes narrowed. 2 of the other men, twins by the look of them, both broad-shouldered and silent, exchanged a look. "After what?" Finn pressed, leaning forward. "Doesn't matter," the leader said firmly. "Not our business." "It is if it affects whether we get backup," the woman said. "Drop it, Mara." Mara's jaw tightened, but she went quiet. Elyra stayed low, listening. Her mind raced, cataloging information. Warlords, settlements burning, the stronghold under attack, packs refusing to help, Kael losing support. It was worse than she'd thought. Good. She started to back away, moving slowly, carefully. One wrong step and they'd hear her. The hunting party might be distracted, but they were still wolves. Their senses were sharp. Ash growled. It was quiet, barely a rumble in his chest, but in the silence of the forest, it might as well have been a shout. The leader's head snapped up. "Did you hear that?" Elyra froze. Her hand went to Ash's scruff, gripping tight. "Quiet," she willed him. "Please be quiet." "Hear what?" Finn asked, looking around nervously. "Shut up." The leader stood, his hand going to the blade at his hip. "Something's out there." The others scrambled to their feet, weapons drawn. The woman, Mara, had a bow, an arrow already knocked and drawn back. The twins moved to flank the leader, their movements synchronized. Elyra weighed her options. She could run, Probably make it before they caught her. She was faster than she used to be, and Ash could move like lightning when he needed to. Or she could stay hidden and hope they didn't find her. The underbrush was thick here. If she didn't move, didn't breathe too loud, or she could do something stupid, the smart play was to run. The safe play was to hide. But Elyra was done being smart. Done being safe. She stood. 5 heads whipped toward her. 5 weapons came up. Blades, bow, a wicked-looking axe one of the twins carried. Easy, Elyra said, raising her hands slowly. Palm out, non-threatening. I'm not here to fight. The leader's eyes narrowed. He took a half step forward, his blade still raised. Who the hell are you? No one, Elyra said. The lie came easily. Just passing through. Passing through to where? Mara asked, her bow still trained on Elyra's chest. The arrow point didn't waver. Professional. South. Why? Elyra didn't answer. The leader took another step closer. He was big, taller than Kael, broader in the shoulders with the kind of bulk that came from a lifetime of fighting. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, taking in her ragged cloak, her 2 big boots, the wild tangle of her hair streaked with white. You're from the frontier, he said. It wasn't a question. Elyra said nothing. How long you been out there? Long enough. And you survived. He sounded skeptical, almost impressed. Alone? Not alone, Elyra said. She gestured toward the trees behind her. I had help. Ash stepped into view, his yellow eyes gleaming in the firelight. He was massive in the shadows, his black fur making him look like a piece of the night had detached and come to life. The hunting party tensed. Finn actually took a step back, his face going pale. Mara's bow creaked as she drew it back further, the string taut enough to snap. That's a rogue, she said. Her voice was steady, but Elyra could hear the edge in it. Fear, carefully controlled. He's with me, Elyra said. Rogues don't travel with people, Finn said. His voice cracked on the last word. They kill people. This one doesn't. The leader studied Ash for a long moment. Ash stared back, unblinking, his posture relaxed but ready. Elyra had seen him move. He could cover the distance between them in less than a second if he wanted to. What's your name? The leader asked, his attention shifting back to Elyra. She hesitated. Giving her name was a risk. If word got back to the stronghold that she was alive, Kael would know she was coming. He'd have time to prepare, to set guards, to decide how to deal with her. But lying felt wrong, weak, and she was done being weak. Elyra, she said finally. Elyra Voss. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Finn's eyes went wide, his mouth falling open. Mara's bow dipped, the arrow point dropping toward the ground. The twins both took a step back. The leader went very still, his knuckles white around the hilt of his blade. You're supposed to be dead, he said slowly. Disappointed? The king exiled you, Mara said. She'd lowered her bow completely now. The arrow still knocked but pointed at the ground. Threw you out to die in the frontier. That was, what, 5 weeks ago? 6, Elyra said. No one survives 6 weeks in the frontier, one of the twins said. His voice was deep, rough. Especially not... He cut himself off, but Elyra knew what he'd been about to say. Especially not someone like you, someone broken, someone with no wolf. Especially not what? She asked quietly. The twin had the grace to look embarrassed. Nothing. The leader sheathed his blade slowly. The gesture was deliberate, careful. You're going back, he said, to the stronghold. Yes? Why? That's my business. Mara let out a short, sharp laugh. Your business is going to get you killed. If you show your face there, the king will... The king will what? Elyra interrupted. Exile me again? Already tried that. Didn't take. He'll kill you, Finn said. His voice was almost pleading. The king doesn't forgive, especially not... Especially not what? Elyra asked again. Say it. Especially not the broken girl he rejected? The defective mate he threw away? Silence. I'm not that girl anymore, Elyra said. Her voice was calm, too calm. And Kael is going to learn that the hard way. The leader studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved from her face to her hands. She could see him noticing the scars, the calluses, the faint shimmer of silver that never quite faded from her skin anymore. "You've changed," he said. "The frontier changes you, or it kills you. There's no middle ground." "What happened out there?" Elyra smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "I stopped being afraid." The leader nodded slowly, like he understood something he hadn't before. Then, deliberately, he stepped aside. "We can't stop you," he said, "but I'll give you some advice. Whatever you're planning, think twice. The Stronghold's a war zone right now. The warlords hit the outer territories 2 days ago. Kael's forces are stretched thin. People are scared, desperate. If you walk in there looking like—" He gestured at her, taking in her feral appearance. "Like that, they'll tear you apart before you get 10 feet. "Let them try," Elyra said. Mara lowered her bow completely now, returning the arrow to her quiver. "You really think you can take on the king?" "I don't think anything," Elyra said. "I know." The leader shook his head slowly. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest." "Probably both," Elyra admitted. She turned to leave. Ash fell into step beside her, his shoulder brushing against her hip. "Wait," the leader called. She stopped but didn't turn around. "The eastern road's blocked," he said. "Warlord scouts everywhere, patrols every half-mile. If you're heading to the Stronghold, take the old mining pass. It's longer, but it's clear. They don't know about it yet." "Why are you helping me?" Elyra asked, glancing back over her shoulder. The leader was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because the king's an ass, and maybe it's time someone reminded him that he's not untouchable." Elyra nodded once. "What's your name?" "Gareth." "Thank you, Gareth." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "You might not survive long enough to make it matter." Elyra smiled. "I'll take my chances." She walked away, Ash at her side, and didn't look back. But she could feel their eyes on her until she disappeared into the trees. The mining pass was a nightmare. It was a narrow trail carved into the side of a mountain, barely wide enough for one person. On one side, sheer rock face that rose hundreds of feet, black stone streaked with mineral deposits that gleamed dully in the weak sunlight. On the other, a drop so deep Elyra couldn't see the bottom, just darkness and the sound of wind howling up from below. The path itself was treacherous. Ice covered most of it, making every step a gamble. Loose rocks skittered away under her boots, tumbling down into the void. In some places, the path had crumbled away entirely, leaving gaps she had to jump across while the wind tried to shove her sideways. Ash hated it. She could tell by the way his ears were pinned back, the way his claws scraped and scrabbled for purchase on the icy stone. He pressed close to the rock wall, his whole body tense. "I know," Elyra murmured to him. "I don't like it either." They moved slowly, carefully. One wrong step and it was over. No second chances. Just a long fall and a sudden stop. The wind here was vicious, howling through the pass like something alive and angry. It tore at her cloak, tried to shove her off the edge. More than once, she had to drop to her hands and knees and crawl, her fingers numb and bleeding as she clung to the rock. Halfway through, Elyra's foot slipped. She went down hard, her knee slamming into the rock with a crack she felt in her teeth. Pain exploded up her leg, white-hot and blinding. She grabbed for the wall, her fingers finding a crack, holding on while her other leg dangled over the void. For a moment, she just hung there, breathing hard, staring down into the darkness below. It would be so easy to let go, to just fall, to stop fighting. Then Ash was there. He barked once, sharp and commanding, lunged forward, grabbed the back of her cloak with his teeth and pulled, his paws scrabbling on the ice, his whole body straining. Elyra kicked against the stone, found purchase, and hauled herself back onto the path. She lay there for a moment, gasping, her heart trying to punch through her ribs. Her knee throbbed. When she looked down, she could see blood seeping through her pants. "Thanks," she managed, her voice shaking. Ash huffed, licked her face once, his tongue rough and warm. Then he turned and kept walking, glancing back over his shoulder like he was saying, "Come on, we're not done yet." Elyra pushed herself to her feet. Her knees screamed in protest, but it held. She limped after him, one hand on the wall, and tried not to think about how much further they had to go. They made it through just as the sun was setting. On the other side, the land opened up into a valley, rolling hills dotted with farmsteads and small villages. And in the distance, rising against the horizon like a black tooth, the Stronghold. Elyra stood there staring at it. She'd forgotten how big it was, how imposing. Stone walls 30 feet high, thick enough to withstand a siege. Towers that scrape the sky, their tops lost in low clouds. Banners flying from the ramparts, the wolf's head sigil snapping in the wind. Home. Except it had never really been home, had it? It had been a prison. A place where she'd spent her whole life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough that people would just leave her alone. She wasn't small anymore. "Come on," she said to Ash. Her voice was steady now, cold. "Let's finish this, Set." She reached the outskirts of the stronghold territory just after midnight. The first thing she noticed was the smoke. It rose from the eastern fields in thick black columns, blotting out the stars. She could smell it from a mile away, wood and flesh, and something chemical that made her eyes water. The scent was thick, cloying, coating the back of her throat. The second thing she noticed was the bodies. They were scattered across the road like broken dolls. Men, women, a few children, all dead. Some burned so badly they were barely recognizable as human. Some torn apart, limbs scattered, entrails painting the snow red. One man was missing his head entirely. She found it 10 feet away, the eyes still open, staring at nothing. Elyra walked among them, her face expressionless. She'd seen death before. The frontier had taught her what it looked like up close. But this was different. This was deliberate, systematic. This was a message. Ash sniffed at the corpses, growling low in his chest. He could smell something Elyra couldn't, something that made his hackles rise. These weren't warriors. They were farmers. Families. People who'd never held a weapon in their lives. Their hands were rough from work, not fighting. Their clothes were simple homespun, not armor. The warlords had done this, cut through them like they were nothing, and Kael hadn't stopped them. Elyra kept walking. The road led her to what had once been a village. Now it was just rubble. Buildings collapsed, roofs caved in, everything scorched black. The well in the town square had been filled with bodies. She could see arms and legs sticking out of the water, pale and bloated. A few survivors huddled in the remains of a barn. 6 of them, maybe 7. They looked up as Elyra approached, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed, their bodies wrapped in whatever scraps of cloth they'd managed to salvage. "Water!" one of them croaked. An old woman, her hair singed down to her scalp, her dress torn and blood-stained. "Please, do you have water?" Elyra had none to give. She shook her head. The woman's face crumpled. She started to cry, these awful dry sobs that had no tears left in them, just raw sounds of grief and exhaustion. "When did this happen?" Elyra asked quietly. "Yesterday," a man said. He was younger, maybe 30, with burns up and down his arms that looked infected. The skin was red and weeping. "They came at dawn, killed everyone who fought back, took the rest." "Took them where?" "East, to the warlord camps." His voice was flat, dead, like he'd used up all his emotions and had nothing left. "They'll sell them. Or worse." "How many warlords?" "Hundreds, maybe more." The man stared at the ground. "They move in packs, fast, organized, not like raiders, like an army." "Did the king send soldiers?" The man laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound, like glass scraping against stone. "The king? The king doesn't care about us. We're too far from the stronghold, too unimportant. He's protecting the nobles, the rich families. People like us, we're expendable." "That's not true," Elyra said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The man looked at her properly for the first time. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "Who are you?" "No one." "Then run," he said. "Get as far from here as you can. This whole territory's dying. The king can't save it. He won't even try." "Yes, he will," Elyra said. The man laughed again. "You really believe that?" Elyra didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, Ash following close behind. But as she walked, she felt something twist in her chest. Not pity. She'd left pity behind in the frontier, but something close to it. These people had done nothing wrong. They'd just been in the way when the warlords came through, and Kael had left them to die. She reached the stronghold gates just before dawn. They were closed, barred from the inside with thick wooden beams that would take 10 men to lift. Guards lined the walls above, their faces hidden behind helmets, crossbows in hand. At least 20 of them that she could see, probably more she couldn't. Elyra stopped 50 feet from the gate. Ash sat beside her, his ears forward, watching. "Open the gate!" she shouted. Her voice echoed off the stone walls. The guards didn't move. "I said open the gate!" One of the guards leaned over the wall. His face was young, couldn't be more than 20, but his eyes were hard. "Go away! We're not letting anyone in! King's orders!" "I'm not anyone," Elyra said. "I'm Elyra Voss, and I'm here to see the king." Silence, then laughter, sharp and cruel, echoing from multiple guards. "Elyra Voss is dead!" another guard shouted. "Died in the frontier like she deserved." "Do I look dead to you?" Elyra called back. More laughter, but it was nervous now. Uncertain. She could hear it in the way the sound broke, the way it didn't quite carry. "Prove it," the first guard said. "Prove you're her." Elyra raised her hands slowly, palms up, and let the fire come. It started as a warmth in her chest, then heat in her arms, then flame, silver flame that didn't burn her skin, didn't hurt at all. It erupted from her palms in twin pillars of fire, shooting 30 feet into the air, bright enough to turn night into day. The guards stumbled back, shielding their eyes, shouting in panic. One of them dropped his crossbow. It clattered against the stone. Elyra held the fire for 5 seconds. 10. 15. Let them get a good look. Let them see what she'd become. Then she closed her fists, and the fire vanished, leaving only smoke and the smell of ozone. The silence that followed was absolute. "Open," Elyra said quietly. "The gate." For a moment, nothing happened. The guards just stared down at her, their faces pale, their hands shaking. Then she heard it, the grind of metal on metal, the bar lifting, the gate swinging open with a groan of old hinges. Elyra walked through. The courtyard beyond was chaos. People running everywhere, shouting orders, carrying wounded on stretchers. Soldiers in blood-stained armor stumbling toward the barracks. Healers with their hands full, their aprons soaked red. The air stank of sweat and fear and infection. No one paid her any attention at first. She was just another body in the crowd, another refugee seeking shelter. Then someone screamed, "It's her! It's the outcast!" Heads turned. Voices dropped. The crowd parted like water around a stone, leaving Elyra standing alone in the center of the courtyard with Ash at her side. She saw faces she recognized. The baker who'd refused to sell her bread. The seamstress who'd charged her double for thread. The guards who'd dragged her to the border. People who'd laughed at her, spat on her, bet on how long she'd last. Now they just stared, their faces pale, their mouths open. "Where's Kael?" Elyra asked. Her voice was calm, conversational. No one answered. "I asked you a question." Still calm, too calm. "Where's the king?" "The Great Hall," someone finally said. A young soldier, barely old enough to shave, with a bandage wrapped around his head. Blood seeped through it. "He's in the Great Hall." Elyra started walking. Ash followed, his claws clicking against the stone. The crowd scattered in front of them, pressing back against the walls, afraid to get too close. She could hear whispers following her. "How is she alive? What is that thing with her? Did you see her hands? Did you see the fire?" She climbed the steps to the main keep. The doors were heavy oak, reinforced with iron. She pushed them open like they weighed nothing. Walked down corridors she'd scrubbed on her hands and knees 100 times, past rooms where she'd emptied chamber pots and changed sheets and kept her head down. Everything looked smaller than she remembered. The doors to the Great Hall were closed. 2 guards stood in front of them, spears crossed in an X. They were older than most, veterans by the look of the scars on their faces. "You can't go in there," one of them said. His voice was firm but not unkind. "Move," Elyra said. "The king gave orders. No one enters without permission." Elyra flicked her wrist. Silver fire lashed out like a whip, melting the spears in half. The metal glowed red hot, then white, then dripped onto the floor in molten puddles. The guards jumped back, eyes wide, hands going to their swords. But they didn't draw, just stared at the ruined weapons, then at Elyra. "I said move." They moved. Elyra pushed open the doors and walked into the Great Hall. It looked exactly the same stone floor where she'd stood barefoot 6 weeks ago. Same torches burning in their brackets. Same platform at the far end with the same black stone throne. And sitting on that throne, slumped like he'd been awake for days, was Kael. He looked terrible. His hair was a mess, unwashed and falling into his face. His armor was scratched and dented, one pauldron hanging loose, dark circles under his eyes like bruises. His jaw was covered in stubble. Saren stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, whispering urgently in his ear. But he wasn't listening. He was staring at a map spread across a table in front of him, his jaw clenched so tight Elyra could see the muscles jumping. "We don't have enough men," he was saying. His voice was hoarse. "If they hit the western border simultaneously—" "They won't," Saren said. Her voice was tight, controlled, but Elyra could hear the stress underneath. "They're focused on the east. We can pull forces from—" "You don't know that. You're guessing. Kael, listen to me. I said we don't have enough men." Kael slammed his fist on the table. The map jumped. A wooden marker fell off, clattered to the floor. Saren flinched, actually flinched, taking a step back. Elyra had never seen her do that before. It was then that Kael looked up and saw Elyra standing in the doorway, ash beside her, silver light still flickering faintly around her hands. All the color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Hello, Kael," Elyra said. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. The entire hall seemed to be holding its breath. Then Saren's hand went to the knife at her belt. "Guards!" she shouted. Her voice was shrill, panicked. "Guards! Get in here now!" Footsteps thundered in the corridor. A dozen soldiers poured into the hall, weapons drawn, swords, spears, one with an axe that looked like it could split a boulder. "Seize her!" Saren commanded, pointing at Elyra. The soldiers hesitated. They looked at Elyra, at the massive black wolf beside her, at the faint silver glow still flickering around her hands, at the way she stood, relaxed, confident, like she owned the room. No one moved. "I said seize her!" Saren's voice rose higher, cracking. "She's an exile, a traitor! Arrest her!" "Let her speak," Kael said quietly. Saren spun toward him. "What?" "I said let her speak." Kael's eyes never left Elyra's. His face was unreadable now, the shock buried under layers of control. "I want to hear what the dead have to say." Elyra smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You're losing," she said simply. "The warlords are tearing through your territory like it's made of paper. Your people are dying in their homes. Your soldiers are deserting. Half your allied packs won't answer your call. And you're sitting here arguing with your beta about maps and troop movements that won't matter because you don't have the forces to execute them." Kael's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. "What do you want?" "I want to watch you beg," Elyra said. "The same way I should have begged when you threw me out. But I didn't. I was too shocked, too broken. And now I'm back, stronger than you ever imagined. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to ask me for help. Nicely. And I'm going to decide whether you deserve it." The hall was dead silent. Elyra could hear her own heartbeat, slow and steady. Saren laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound, like breaking glass. "You think you can just walk in here and make demands? You're nothing. You were nothing then, and you're nothing now. Guards, I don't care what the king said. Arrest her." "Try it," Elyra said, her eyes still locked on Kael. "See what happens." The guards looked at each other. At Saren. At Kael. No one moved. "I don't think," Elyra continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "that you understand what I've become. I've survived things that would have killed you 10 times over. I've learned to bend fire to my will. I've made allies out of monsters." She gestured to Ash. "I've become something you can't even begin to understand, something your pretty theories and your ancient bloodlines can't explain." She took a step forward. The soldiers tensed but didn't raise their weapons. "So tell me, Alpha King," Elyra said, "are you going to swallow your pride and ask? Or are you going to let your kingdom burn because you're too stubborn to admit you need help from the girl you threw away like garbage?" Kael stared at her. His hands were shaking. She could see them gripping the edge of the table. From rage or fear, Elyra couldn't tell. Maybe both. Then, slowly, he stood. Walked down from the platform. Each step deliberate, measured, stopped 5 feet away from her. And for the first time since she'd known him, Kael Draven looked small. mortal, breakable. Please, he said. The word seemed to physically hurt him, dragging itself out of his throat like broken glass. Help us. Elyra's smile widened. That's better, she said. Now, let's talk about terms. Kael's War Council chamber was smaller than the Great Hall, lit by oil lamps that threw dancing shadows across maps and scattered reports. The air smelled like old smoke and desperation. Elyra stood at the head of the table, ash lying at her feet, while a dozen of Kael's most trusted advisors stared at her like she'd crawled out of a grave, which, in a way, she had. You can't be serious, Seren said. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had gone white. You're actually going to negotiate with her? I don't see another option, Kael said. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, his voice flat. We're losing, badly. We have options, Seren insisted. We can call in debts from the Southern Pacts. The Southern Pacts haven't answered 3 requests, one of the advisors interrupted. He was an older man, gray-haired, with a scar that ran from temple to jaw. His name was Marcus, and he'd been military counsel for 20 years. They're protecting their own borders. They think we're already lost. Then we fortify the stronghold and wait them out. Wait them out with what supplies? Another advisor cut in. A woman this time, thin and sharp-featured, with ink stains on her fingers from writing too many desperate reports. Her name was Lydia, and she managed the stronghold's resources. The eastern farms are burned. The grain stores went up with them. The western supply lines are cut. We have maybe 2 weeks of food if we ration strictly. 1 week if the refugees keep flooding in. 2 weeks is enough time to... To what? Elyra asked quietly. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. I'm curious, Elyra continued, leaning forward slightly. What exactly is your plan, Seren? Because from where I'm standing, you've spent the last month making things worse. The warlords are organized. They're not raiders. They're an army. And you've been treating them like a border skirmish. Seren's face flushed red. You don't know anything about... I know that 300 people died in the eastern villages yesterday, Elyra said. Her voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath. I walked through the bodies. Children, Seren, families, mothers still holding their babies, and where were Kael's forces? Sitting here, protecting nobles and counting supplies while farmers burned. We don't have the men to be everywhere. Then you need to make better choices about where you send them. Elyra straightened, her eyes moving around the table. You're fighting a defensive war against an enemy that wants you desperate. Every day you wait, they get stronger and you get weaker. That's not strategy. That's slow suicide. Seren stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. I don't have to listen to this. Not from someone who... Someone who what? Elyra interrupted. Someone you threw away, someone you convinced Kael was worthless? She smiled, and it was cold enough to freeze blood. Tell me, Seren, was it your idea to exile me, or did you just whisper it in his ear until he thought it was his own? The silence that followed was deafening. Kael's head snapped up. What? Nothing, Seren said quickly, too quickly. She's lying, trying to drive a wedge between us. Am I? Elyra asked. She looked at Kael directly. Do you remember who suggested the exile? Who kept talking about how I was a liability? Who said the council would lose faith in you if you kept a defective mate? Who whispered that you'd look weak, that the other packs would see it as a sign you couldn't make hard decisions? Kael's jaw tightened. He looked at Seren, really looked at her, and Elyra could see the moment realization hit. Is that true? I was protecting you, Seren said. Her voice was defensive now, sharp, with an edge of panic. The council was already questioning your judgment. If you'd kept her, if you'd shown that kind of weakness. If I'd kept her, maybe I'd have someone with actual power on my side right now, instead of an advisor who's been wrong about everything for the past month. Seren recoiled like she'd been slapped. Her face went pale, then flushed red again. How dare you? Enough, Marcus said. His voice was tired. This isn't helping. He looked at Elyra. You said you had terms. Elyra straightened, pulling her attention away from Serene's wounded expression. I'll help you fight the warlords. I'll use my power to turn the tide. But I have conditions. Name them, Kael said. First, I want a full pardon. Exile lifted, all charges dropped, my name restored. I want it in writing, sealed by the council, public. Done. Second, I want command of the Eastern Defense. Full authority. No interference from your council or your beta. My decisions are final. Several advisors started to protest. Marcus raised a hand to quiet them, but they ignored him. Absolutely not. You can't give military command to an untested. She doesn't even have formal training. Kael's voice cut through the chaos. What else? The room went quiet again. Elyra met his eyes. Third, when this is over, when we've won, you step down. The room exploded. Absolutely not. That's treason. You can't seriously be considering. This is madness. Lydia slammed her hand on the table. She wants the crown. She's been planning this from the beginning. I don't want the crown, Elyra said, her voice cutting through the noise. I want a kingdom that doesn't throw away its people when they don't fit a perfect mold. I want leadership that actually leads instead of reacting. I want someone in power who remembers that strength isn't just about who can shift or who has the purest bloodline. And you think that's you? Seren's voice was venomous. I know it is. Kael held up both hands. Everyone out, now. The advisors hesitated. I said out. His voice cracked like a whip. The Alpha Command was back, the voice that compelled obedience. They filed out slowly, muttering, shooting dark looks at Elyra. Marcus paused at the door, gave her an appraising look that wasn't entirely hostile, then left. Seren was the last to go, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. She stopped at the threshold. This will destroy you, she said to Kael. Destroy us. Maybe, Kael said, but at least I'll still have a kingdom left to rule. When the door closed, silence settled over the room like snow. Kael moved to the window, staring out at the smoke-stained horizon. You want me to give up the crown, he said quietly. Yes. Why? Because you're not fit to lead, Elyra said bluntly. You're a good fighter, maybe even a good tactician when you're not listening to bad advice. But you're a terrible king. You let Seren manipulate you. You ignored your people until it was too late. You threw away anyone who didn't fit your perfect vision of what a wolf should be. Kael flinched, but didn't turn around. I'm not doing this for revenge, Elyra continued, her voice softer now. I'm doing it because this kingdom needs someone who actually gives a damn about the people in it. Not just the strong ones, not just the pure-blooded ones, all of them. The farmers, the craftsmen, the ones who can't shift but work themselves to death, keeping the packs fed and clothed. And you think that's you? I know it is, because I was one of them. Kael was quiet for a long moment. When he finally turned, his face was unreadable. You've changed. The frontier changes you, or it kills you. There's no third option. What happened out there? Really? Elyra considered the question, considered telling him about the dreams, the silver fire, the voice that spoke in 1,000 tongues, the woman made of flame who claimed to be what they'd buried. But she settled for simpler truth. I stopped being afraid of what I was, she said. Started being afraid of what I could become if I didn't control it. Kael nodded slowly. He moved back to the table, braced his hands against it, stared down at the maps. The third condition. I can't agree to it. Not yet. Win this war first. Prove you can lead. Prove the kingdom will follow you. Then we'll talk. Not good enough. It's the best I can offer. He looked up, met her eyes. You want the truth? I don't know if I'm fit to be king. Maybe I never was. Maybe I've been playing a role I inherited instead of earned. But I can't just hand it over on faith. The Pax won't accept it. The Council will revolt. We'll have civil war on top of invasion. Elyra studied him, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of command pressing down on shoulders that had never been strong enough to carry it alone. He was drowning, and he knew it. Fine, she said finally. But when this is over, we're having that conversation, and you're not going to like how it ends. Fair enough. Kael straightened, some of his old authority returning. What do you need? Maps. Detailed ones. Every warlord position we know about, every patrol route, every weakness in their line. Scout reports from the last 2 weeks, supply manifests, troop numbers, ours and theirs. I'll have them brought to your quarters. I don't have quarters. You do now. Kael moved to the door, opened it, shouted for a guard. Show Miss Voss to the East Tower. The captain's suite. The guard's eyes widened. But sir, that's Captain Torrens. Torrens dead, Kael said flatly. Died 3 days ago in the Eastern Raid. The room's empty. Take her there. After the guard left with Elyra and Ash following, Kael slumped back into his chair and pressed his hands to his face. His fingers were shaking. He just made a deal with the one person who had every reason to destroy him. And somehow, it felt like the first smart decision he'd made in months. The East Tower suite was luxurious by any standard. Thick carpets that muffled footsteps, a bed that could fit 4 people, windows that overlooked the valley and the distant mountains. There was a writing desk, a wardrobe carved from dark wood, a fireplace with actual logs stacked beside it. Elyra hated it immediately. Too soft, too clean, too much like the life she'd never been allowed to have when she lived here before. She stood at the window, staring out at the smoke still rising from the eastern fields, and felt Ash press against her leg. His warmth was steady, real, uncomplicated. "I know," she murmured, her fingers sinking into his fur. "This feels wrong." A knock at the door. "Come in," she called without turning. The door opened. Heavy footsteps. Then a familiar voice. "So you're really doing this?" Elyra turned. Gareth stood in the doorway, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the formal corridors of the stronghold. He'd cleaned up since she'd seen him last, washed the travel dirt off, put on a clean shirt, but he still had that wild edge of someone who belonged in the forest more than behind stone walls. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Got recalled. All border patrols pulled back to defend the stronghold." He moved into the room, glancing around with the wariness of someone checking for threats. "Nice place, like bit different from a cave in the frontier." "A bit. The others are talking about you. Mara, the twins, some of the other scouts." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They're calling you crazy, saying you made a deal with a devil." "Which devil? Me or Kael?" Gareth cracked a smile. "Both, probably." His expression sobered. "But they're also saying you might actually pull this off. That you've got power none of us have seen before. That you survived 6 weeks in the frontier and came back stronger. They're not wrong." "Show me." Elyra raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I'm about to follow you into battle," Gareth said. "And I'd like to know what I'm following. I've led men before. Lost men. I don't do it lightly." "Fair enough." Elyra held out her hand. "Let the fire come." Not a massive display, just a steady flame dancing in her palm. Silver, bright, beautiful. It cast flickering shadows across Gareth's face. He stared, took a step closer, his eyes reflecting the firelight. That's not wolf fire." "No." "What is it?" "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out." She closed her fist and the flame vanished, leaving only the scent of ozone. "But it works. That's what matters." "Can you teach it?" "I don't know. Maybe. If we survive long enough to try." She paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because if you can make more people like you, we might actually win this thing." Gareth pushed off the wall. "If you can't, then you're one target, one weapon. Take you out, we're back to square one." Always thinking tactically. Someone has to. Another knock. This time, 3 servants entered carrying stacks of maps, reports, books. They set everything on the desk, bowed nervously, especially when they saw Ash, and hurried out. Elyra spread the maps across the table. Gareth moved to stand beside her, his experienced eye immediately picking out details. 3 main warlord camps, she said, pointing to marked positions. Here, here, and here. They're spread out in a triangle, but they coordinate. Hit multiple targets simultaneously. Classic flanking strategy. Hammer and anvil, Gareth agreed. They're not stupid. Probably have military training. Former soldiers, maybe. Mercenaries. Which means they think like soldiers. Predictable patterns. Patterns we can exploit. He traced a line on the map. But their position is smart. Each camp can support the others within a day's march. If we hit one, the other 2 can reinforce before we finish. So we don't hit one. We make them think we're weaker than we are. Draw them in, then hit them where it hurts. Gareth frowned. You want to let them attack the stronghold? I want them to think they can take the stronghold, make them commit, then crush them when they overextend. That's insane. If the plan fails, they'll breach the walls. Everyone inside dies. Got a better idea? Gareth was quiet for a long moment, studying the maps. Then he shook his head. No, but I don't like it. You don't have to like it. You just have to help me make it work. When do we start? Tomorrow. Gather anyone who'll listen. I want scouts, fighters, anyone with half a brain, and the willingness to follow orders from someone they don't trust yet. You're going to have a hard time with that last part, Gareth said. Most of the fighters here don't take orders from outsiders, especially not broken girls who should be dead, Elyra finished. I know, let them doubt. Doubt makes people cautious. Cautious people stay alive. Or doubt makes them hesitate when they shouldn't. Then we'll find out which kind they are. After Gareth left, Elyra spent hours poring over the maps, tracing supply lines, noting patrol patterns, looking for weaknesses. The warlords were good, but they weren't perfect. They had blind spots, overconfidence in their numbers, a tendency to commit too many forces to flashy attacks. She could use that. She was so focused, she didn't hear the door open. You're going to get yourself killed. Elyra's head snapped up. Seren stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression cold. She'd changed clothes, traded her advisor's formal wear for something simpler, darker, like she was preparing for a funeral. Maybe, Elyra said, but I'll take a lot of warlords with me. That's not what I meant. Seren stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. Kael's putting too much faith in you. You're a liability. You always have been. Funny. I remember you saying the same thing 6 weeks ago. How'd that work out? I was right then. I'm right now. Then why are you here, Seren? Elyra set down the report she'd been reading. If I'm such a liability, why warn me? Why not just let me walk into whatever trap you think is waiting? Seren's jaw tightened. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, because despite everything, I don't want to see Kael destroyed. And tying his fate to yours will destroy him. Or it'll save him, Elyra said. Hard to tell which at this point. You hate him. Don't pretend you don't. I don't hate him. Elyra leaned back in her chair, studying Seren's face, looking for cracks in the armor. I hate what he represents. I hate that he had the power to throw me away and did it without a second thought. But him personally? She shrugged. He's just a man who made bad choices because someone he trusted gave him bad advice. The frontier's full of those. He cared about you, Seren said quietly. Before the tests. Before the council got involved. He actually cared. Elyra felt something twist in her chest. Then why didn't he fight for me? Because I convinced him not to. Seren's voice was barely above a whisper now. I told him you'd make him weak. That the other packs would see it as a sign he couldn't make hard decisions. That keeping a defective mate would undermine everything he'd built. I pushed and pushed until he agreed to the exile. Elyra stared at her. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth before you die out there. Seren moved toward the door, her hand on the handle. The warlords aren't going to fall for whatever plan you're cooking up. They're going to kill you, and when they do, Kael's going to blame himself. He's going to fall apart, and I'll be the one picking up the pieces, like I always have been. You love him, Elyra said. It wasn't a question. Seren's hand tightened on the door handle. Since we were children, since before he knew what power meant, and I've spent my whole life making sure he survived to claim his birthright. I'm not going to let some girl with fire in her hands undo all of that. She left without waiting for a response, the door closing with a soft click. Elyra sat in the silence, processing. Seren had manipulated everything, the exile, the rejection, all of it orchestrated by someone who loved Kael enough to destroy anyone who threatened her position beside him. It should have made her angrier. Instead, she just felt tired, and a little bit sad, because Seren didn't understand that love wasn't about control. It was about letting go. The attack came at dawn. Elyra woke to the sound of bells, the alarm bells that meant the stronghold was under assault. She was on her feet in seconds, already reaching for her boots, her mind snapping into focus. Ash was up too, hackles raised, growling low. They raced down the stairs toward the courtyard, Elyra's hand on Ash's back for balance as they took the steps 3 at a time. Chaos. Absolute chaos. Soldiers running everywhere, some only half-dressed, grabbing weapons from racks, screams from the walls, the sound of something massive hitting the gate, Boom, 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 like a battering ram the size of a tree. Elyra found Kael on the western wall, staring out at the valley below. Marcus was beside him, along with half a dozen other commanders, all of them with faces like stone. She looked over the wall, and her breath stopped. The valley was filled with warlords, not hundreds, thousands. An ocean of bodies stretching as far as she could see, banners flying, weapons gleaming in the early morning light. They'd moved overnight, bringing the bulk of their forces right to the stronghold's doorstep. Siege equipment, too, rams, catapults, tall wooden towers that could bring attackers level with the walls. How? Kael breathed. His face was pale. How did they get so close without our scouts seeing them? They killed the scouts, Gareth said, appearing beside them. His face was grim, blood on his shirt. Found 3 bodies just outside the tree line, throats cut. They've been planning this for days. We're not ready for a siege, Marcus said. His voice was steady but tight. We don't have the supplies for more than 2 weeks, maybe less with this many people inside the walls. Then we don't siege, Elyra said. Everyone turned to look at her. We go out and meet them. That's suicide, Marcus said flatly. They outnumber us 10 to 1, maybe more. So is starving behind these walls while they pick us apart. Elyra looked at Kael. You wanted me to lead the eastern defense. This is me leading. Open the gates. Let me take a force out. You're insane, Seren said. She'd appeared from somewhere, her face pale, her hands shaking. We have walls for a reason. Walls won't save us if we can't feed the people inside them, Elyra shot back. And they won't save us if we lose morale. Right now, everyone in this stronghold is terrified. They need to see that we can fight back, that we're not just going to roll over and die. How? Kael asked. His voice was quiet. How do you fight that many? Elyra smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. You're about to find out what the frontier taught me. 20 minutes later, Elyra stood at the main gate with 50 volunteers behind her. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. But it was what she had. Gareth stood beside her, along with Mara and the twins from the hunting party, a few other scouts, some soldiers who looked young enough that they probably still believed in heroes, one old veteran with a limp and an axe that had seen better days. They all looked terrified. You know this is crazy, right? Gareth said quietly. Completely. Good. Just checking. Elyra turned to face her small force. 50 pairs of eyes stared back at her, waiting, hoping, afraid. I'm not going to lie to you, she said. Her voice carried in the quiet courtyard. The odds are bad, really bad. There's thousands of them and 50 of us. Most of you are probably going to die out there. Someone laughed nervously. Another person swore. But here's what I need you to understand, Elyra continued. We're not trying to win. Not today. We're trying to show them that we're not afraid, that we'll fight back, that every inch of ground they take from us will cost them blood. She let that sink in. Saw spines straightening, jaws setting. Stay together. Watch each other's backs. When I give the signal, you run. You don't argue. You don't try to be a hero. You run back to these gates and you live to fight another day. Understood? Nods all around. Good. Elyra turned to the gate. Open it. The gate swung open with a groan of protesting hinges. Elyra walked out first, Ash at her side, her hands already beginning to glow silver. Behind her, she heard the nervous shuffle of feet, the rasp of weapons being drawn, someone muttering a prayer. The warlord army stretched before them. A sea of bodies, weapons, siege equipment. At the front, mounted on a massive black horse that looked mean enough to eat smaller horses, sat their leader. He was enormous. Had to be 7 feet tall at least, with shoulders like a bull and arms thick as tree trunks. He wore armor made from bones. Human bones, animal bones, all lashed together with leather and wire. His face was scarred, one eye milky white from an old wound. He saw Elyra and her tiny force and started to laugh. The king sends a little girl to negotiate? His voice boomed across the field like thunder. I'm insulted! His army joined in, a roar of cruel amusement that echoed off the stronghold walls. I'm not here to negotiate, Elyra called back. I'm here to give you a chance to leave. The warlord laughed harder, slapped his thigh. Leave! Child, we're about to burn your precious stronghold to the ground. Take everything you have. Sell your people to the highest bidder. Why would we leave? Because I'm asking nicely. Elyra's hands flared brighter. And I only ask once. Or what? Elyra raised both hands and let everything go. The silver fire erupted from her in a wave. Not a controlled burst, not a careful demonstration. Everything she had, everything she'd been holding back, everything she'd learned in the frontier, and then some. The power that had been sleeping in her blood since birth, the thing they'd sealed away because they were afraid. It hit the front line of the warlord army like a tsunami. Men screamed, burned. The smell of cooking flesh filled the air, thick and terrible. The siege equipment caught fire, wood and rope going up in seconds, flames reaching toward the sky. The massive battering ram cracked down the middle, consumed by silver flame that burned hot enough to melt the metal reinforcements. Horses panicked, throwing their riders, trampling anyone in their way. Soldiers scattered, their formations breaking, their courage evaporating. Elyra held it for 10 seconds, 20, 30, longer than she'd ever managed before, longer than should have been possible. When she finally let it drop, she collapsed to one knee, gasping. Her whole body was shaking. Sweat poured down her face. Her hands were smoking, but the damage was done. The front third of the warlord army was gone. Just gone. Ash and smoke and bodies. The ground was scorched black, still glowing red in places. The survivors stared in horror. Behind her, Elyra heard stunned silence from her own people. Then someone started cheering, then another, then all of them, a roar of triumph that matched the warlord's earlier mockery. "That's your warning," Elyra managed, her voice hoarse. "Leave now, or I do it again." For a moment, just a moment, she thought it might actually work. The warlords were backing up, their formation broken, their courage shattered. The massive leader had dismounted, was staring at the carnage with an expression she couldn't read. Then he started to laugh again. "Interesting trick," he said. He started walking forward through the ash and bodies like they were nothing more than scattered leaves. "But you're exhausted, I can see it. You've got nothing left." He was right. Elyra could barely stand. The fire was gone, burned out, leaving her hollow. "And you're not the only one with power, little girl." The warlord leader started to change. His body twisted, grew, bones cracking and reforming with sounds that made Elyra's stomach turn. Fur sprouted, gray and black, matted and filthy. Claws extended, each one as long as her hand. His face elongated, jaw stretching, teeth becoming fangs like daggers. Within seconds, he wasn't a man anymore. He was a wolf. The biggest Elyra had ever seen, easily twice the size of Ash, maybe 3 times, with red eyes that glowed like embers and a scar that ran down one side of his face. "My name is Rakan," he growled. His voice was still human somehow, resonant and deep, echoing from a throat that shouldn't be able to form words. "And I've killed better than you," he charged. Elyra tried to summon the fire again, reached deep, searching for even a spark. Nothing came. She'd used too much, burned herself out completely. The massive wolf was 10 feet away. 5. Then Ash hit him from the side like a bolt of black lightning. The 2 wolves collided with a sound like thunder, tumbling across the scorched ground in a tangle of fangs and fury. Ash was smaller, faster, more agile. But Rakan was stronger, brutally strong. He got his jaws around Ash's throat, started to squeeze. Ash yelped, thrashing, his claws raking bloody furrows down Rakan's side. Elyra screamed, and something inside her broke. Not broke, opened, like a dam shattering, like chains snapping, like a door she didn't know existed flying open and revealing something vast and terrible and beautiful on the other side. The silver fire came back, but different this time. Brighter, hotter. Not from her hands, but from everywhere. From her skin, from her eyes, from her mouth, from deep in her chest where something ancient had been sleeping for longer than she'd been alive. She could hear the voice from her dreams, the woman made of flame. "Now you understand. Now you see. Now you burn." Elyra didn't walk toward Rakan. She flew, lifted off the ground by force of pure power, silver fire trailing behind her like wings, like a comet, like something out of myth. She hit him hard enough to send him flying off Ash, his massive body tumbling across the ground. Pinned him with one hand, her fingers digging into his throat. Not her normal fingers. Something else now, something burning. "You wanted to see power?" she said. Her voice echoed, layered with that thousand-voice chorus, wrong and beautiful and terrifying. Let me show you. She poured everything into him, every ounce of rage at her exile, every moment of fear in the frontier, every second of suffering she'd endured, every humiliation, every cruel word, every time she'd been made to feel like nothing. The silver fire consumed him from the inside out, burning through fur and flesh and bone like they were paper. Rakan screamed, a sound that would haunt her dreams, and then he was gone. Just ash. Just smoke. Just nothing. Elyra stood slowly, the fire still wreathing her body like living armor. The entire warlord army was fleeing, running, abandoning their siege equipment, their wounded, everything, just trying to get away from the thing that had killed their leader. From her. Elyra turned back toward the stronghold. Her people were staring at her, their faces pale, their mouths open. Even Gareth looked afraid. She took a step toward them. The fire flickered, faded, and she collapsed. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Kael running toward her, his face twisted with something between awe and terror, shouting her name. And behind him, Seren, standing perfectly still, her face twisted with something that might have been fear, or might have been the cold calculation of someone realizing their carefully laid plans had just turned to ash. Elyra woke to the smell of herbs and smoke. Her body felt like it had been beaten with hammers, then set on fire, then beaten again for good measure. Every muscle ached. Her throat was raw. When she tried to move her fingers, they barely responded. Don't. The voice was female, unfamiliar. Elyra's eyes cracked open. The room was dim, lit by a single candle. She was in a bed. Not the luxurious one from the East Tower, something simpler. Medical quarters, maybe. A woman sat beside the bed, elderly, with silver hair tied back and hands stained with plant dyes. A healer. You've been out for 2 days, the woman said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, professional. Your body nearly tore itself apart. Whatever you did out there, it wasn't meant for human flesh. Ash, Elyra croaked. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed glass. The wolf? He's fine. Guarding your door. Won't let anyone in except me and the king. The healer held up a cup. Drink, slowly. The water tasted like metal and something bitter, but Elyra didn't care. She drained the cup. The warlords? She managed. Scattered. Most of them fled after you killed their leader. The rest surrendered or died trying to retreat. The healer set the cup down. You saved the stronghold. You're a hero. The word tasted wrong in Elyra's mouth. Heroes didn't feel like they were dying. Heroes didn't wake up wondering if the power that saved everyone might consume them next time. I need to see Kael, she said. He's been here. Multiple times. Seren keeps pulling him away for council business. The healer's expression soured slightly when she said Seren's name. But I'll send word you're awake. After the healer left, Elyra lay there staring at the ceiling, taking inventory of her body. The silver fire had receded completely, leaving her feeling hollow, empty. Like something vital had been burned away. The door opened. Not Kael. Ash pushed through, immediately crossing to the bed and resting his massive head on the mattress beside her. His yellow eyes studied her face. Hey, Elyra whispered, her hand finding his fur. We made it. Ash huffed. The sound was almost skeptical. Okay, barely made it, she amended. But alive counts. The door opened again. This time it was Kael, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes that made him look 10 years older. You're awake, he said. The relief in his voice was palpable. Apparently, he moved to the chair the healer had vacated, sank into it like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. For a long moment, he just looked at her. I thought you were dead, he said finally. When you collapsed, you weren't breathing. Your heart stopped. The healers had to... He cut himself off, shook his head. It doesn't matter. You're alive. Did we win? You won. You killed their leader, broke their spirit, sent them running. Kael leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The remaining warlord forces are scattered across 3 territories. Some surrendered. Most fled east. A few tried to regroup, but without Rakan, they have no unity. Good. Good? Elyra, you nearly died. You stopped breathing. Your skin was so hot the healers couldn't touch you without burning themselves. His voice rose slightly. What was that? What did you become out there? I don't know, Elyra said honestly. Something old. Something that's been sleeping in my blood since I was born. The exile didn't break me. It broke whatever was keeping it locked away. Kael was quiet for a long moment. The council wants to meet with you when you're recovered. I bet they do. They're afraid of you. Some want you honored. Others want you exiled again. A few want you executed before you lose control. He said the last part with bitter sarcasm. And what do you want? Kael met her eyes. I want to understand what happened. I want to know if you can do it again, and I want to know if it's killing you. Honest answers? I don't know, probably, and definitely. Elyra tried to sit up, managed it on the third attempt. But I made a deal with you. The war's not over. Those scattered warlord forces will regroup if we give them time. You're in no condition to fight. Then I better recover fast. A knock at the door. Gareth entered without waiting for permission, Mara right behind him. Both looked relieved to see Elyra conscious. She lives, Gareth said. I won 20 silver off that bet. You bet on whether I'd survive? Half the stronghold did. I had faith. He grinned, but it faded quickly. We need to talk strategy. The warlords are scattered, but they're not broken. 3 major groups, each about 200 strong. They're regrouping in the eastern territories. Mara unrolled a map on the small table beside the bed. Here, here, and here. If they consolidate again, we're back to square one. Maybe worse, they'll be angry now. Elyra studied the map, her tactical mind already working despite her body's protests. How long until they can regroup? Week, maybe less if they're motivated. Then we hit them before they get the chance. Elyra pointed to the northernmost group. This one first. They're closest to the mountain pass, limited escape routes. We cut them off, scatter them further into the mountains where winter will finish what we start. You're not going anywhere, Kael said firmly. You can barely sit up. I don't need to fight. I need to lead. Elyra looked at Gareth. Can you handle the actual combat? With pleasure. Then take 50 fighters. Fast, light, experienced. Hit them at dawn. Drive them north. Then pull back before they can organize a counter. Gareth nodded, already thinking through logistics. What about the other 2 groups? We'll deal with them after, one at a time. Keep them separated. Keep them scared. Elyra looked at Kael. You wanted to know if I can do it again. I can't. Not for a while. But they don't know that. The rumor of what I did will work in our favor. Kael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'll authorize the strike. One more thing, Elyra said. I want to address the stronghold. All of them. Everyone who's been whispering about whether I'm a hero or a monster. That's not a good idea, Kael started. I don't care if it's a good idea, it's necessary. Elyra's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. These people need to hear from me. They need to know I'm not going to lose control and burn them all. And they need to see that I'm still standing. After Gareth and Mara left to organize the strike force, Kael lingered. There's something else, he said. Seren. She's been difficult since the battle. Difficult how? Questioning everything. Undermining decisions. She tried to convince the council to strip you of command while you were unconscious. Kael's expression was troubled. I've known her my whole life. I've never seen her like this. She's scared, Elyra said. She spent years building her position beside you. Now someone else is threatening that. Someone she can't control or manipulate. She said you'd try to turn me against her. I don't need to turn you against her. She's doing that herself. Elyra met his eyes. But I'll tell you this, whatever feelings she has for you, they're wrapped up in power and control. That's not love, Kael, that's possession. He didn't answer, just stood, moved to the door. Get some rest, he said. You're going to need it. After he left, Elyra lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Ash climbed onto the bed, a flagrant violation of every medical protocol, and curled up beside her, his warmth steady and uncomplicated. She needed to recover fast, because the battle might be won, but the war was far from over. 3 days later, Elyra stood in the great hall facing a crowd of over 1,000 people. She still felt weak, her body not fully recovered, but she'd insisted on standing. No sitting, no showing weakness. The crowd needed to see her as strong, in control, capable. The hall was packed. Soldiers, citizens, nobles, servants, everyone who could fit. They'd come to see the woman who'd killed a warlord leader with fire that wasn't supposed to exist. To see if she was a savior or a threat. Kael stood to one side, arms crossed. Seren beside him, her face a careful mask. The council members lined the walls, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Elyra took a breath and began. 6 weeks ago, I stood in this hall and was told I was nothing, she said. Her voice carried, clear and strong. No wolf, no scent, no bond to the moon. Defective, broken, worthless. The crowd was silent, listening. I was exiled to the frontier to die, and I should have died. The cold should have killed me, the hunger, the predators. Any number of things. She paused. But I didn't die. I survived. And in surviving, I learned something. What? What? Someone called out. A young voice, probably a teenager. That being broken isn't the same as being powerless. Elyra's hands flickered with faint silver light, a demonstration, carefully controlled. The thing they called a defect. It was a seal, a lock placed on power they didn't understand. The exile broke that lock, and what came out saved all of you. You're a monster, someone shouted from the back. Elyra couldn't see who. Maybe, she agreed. I've become something that doesn't fit your definitions. Something that scares you. But ask yourselves, would you rather have a monster who fights for you or die at the hands of monsters who want to destroy everything you love? Silence. The warlords are scattered but not defeated, Elyra continued. They'll regroup if we give them time, so we won't give them time. We're going to hunt them down, break them completely, and make sure they never threaten this kingdom again. And then what? This voice was familiar. Marcus, the military advisor. When the war's over, what happens to your power? That's the question, isn't it? Elyra looked directly at him. What do we do with someone who has power that can't be controlled by your laws, by your traditions? She let that hang for a moment. Here's my answer. I'll use this power to protect you. All of you. Not just the strong. Not just the pure-blooded. Everyone. And when the threat is gone, we'll figure out together what comes next. She paused. But I won't be locked away. I won't be sealed again, and I won't be thrown away when I'm no longer convenient. That sounds like a threat, someone muttered. It's a promise, Elyra corrected. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Judge me by my actions, not by your fear. The crowd erupted in discussion, some arguing, some agreeing, voices overlapping. Elyra let it wash over her, waiting. Then a voice cut through the noise. I'll follow her. Gareth stepped forward from the crowd. She saved my life in the frontier, saved all our lives on that battlefield. I'll follow her. So will I, Mara said, moving to stand beside him. One of the twins, Elyra still couldn't tell them apart, joined them. And me. Then more. Soldiers she'd led in the battle, scouts who'd seen her determination, even a few nobles who'd lost family to the warlords and wanted revenge. Not everyone. Maybe not even half. But enough. Kael stepped forward. The hall went silent again. The council will meet to discuss Miss Voss's role going forward, he said formally. But for now, she has my support and my gratitude. Seren's face went tight, but she said nothing. The crowd began to disperse, people filing out, still arguing among themselves. Elyra stayed where she was, feeling the weight of what she'd just done. She'd drawn a line, forced people to choose sides. It was risky. Could have turned the entire stronghold against her, but it had worked. A hand touched her elbow. The elderly healer from before. That was either very brave or very stupid, the woman said. Probably both, Elyra replied. Good. The smart ones never change anything. The healer pressed something into her hand, a small vial. For the pain. You're pushing yourself too hard. After she left, Elyra looked down at the vial, then pocketed it. She'd need it soon enough. The strike against the Northern Warlord group happened 2 days later. Gareth led 50 fighters through the mountain pass at dawn, hitting the warlords while they were still scattered and disorganized. Elyra monitored from the stronghold, receiving reports via runners every few hours. The waiting was torture. She wanted to be there, fighting, leading, but her body still wasn't ready. The first runner came back at midday. Contact made, warlords scattered, minimal casualties on our side. The second runner arrived at dusk. Warlords retreating into the mountains. We're pursuing until nightfall, then pulling back as ordered. The third runner didn't come until well after dark. Elyra was pacing the war room, Ash watching from a corner, when the door burst open. Not a runner, Gareth himself, covered in blood and grinning like a madman. "We did it," he said. "Broke them completely. They're running so deep into the mountains they'll freeze before they find their way out." Elyra felt something unclench in her chest. Casualties? 3 wounded, none dead. They were so disorganized they barely put up a fight. Gareth crossed to the map, pointed. "The other 2 groups are going to hear about this. They'll know they're next." "Good. Let them be afraid." Kael entered the room, took in Gareth's bloodied appearance, and nodded approvingly. "Well done. Get cleaned up, get some rest. We'll hit the second group in 3 days." After Gareth left, Kael moved to stand beside Elyra at the map. "It's working," he said quietly. "Your strategy. Breaking them piece by piece. For now. But we can't get overconfident." Spoken like someone who's learned from experience. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kael spoke again. "The council met today. About you." Elyra's stomach tightened. "And? It was contentious. Some want you executed. Some want you worshipped. Most are just confused and scared." He paused. "I convinced them to wait, to see how the rest of this campaign plays out. But Elyra, you need to understand, what you did on that battlefield, what you've become, it challenges everything they believe about how power works in this world." "I know. If you lose control, if you hurt innocent people, I won't." "You can't promise that. You don't even fully understand what you are." Elyra turned to face him. "You're right. I can't promise perfect control, but I can promise that I'll never stop trying, that I'll never use this power for anything except protecting people who can't protect themselves." Kael studied her face. "I believe you, but belief isn't enough for the council. Then I'll prove it to them, over and over until they have no choice but to accept it." A knock at the door. A servant entered, bowed nervously. "Your Majesty, Miss Seren requests an urgent meeting." Kael sighed. "Tell her I'll be there shortly." After the servant left, he looked at Elyra. "She's planning something. I can feel it." "Then be careful." "I always am." He moved toward the door, paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived the frontier, glad you came back, even if it complicates everything." After he left, Elyra stood alone in the war room, staring at the map. 2 more warlord groups to eliminate. Then the real challenge, figuring out what came next. The second strike happened 3 days later, just as planned. This time, Elyra insisted on going, despite the healer's protests. "You're not ready," the old woman had said. "I don't need to be ready. I need to be present." She rode out with Gareth's strike force, Ash loping beside her horse. Her body still ached. The silver fire still felt distant and unreliable, but her mind was sharp. The second warlord group had fortified their position. Clearly, they'd learned from what happened to the first group. They'd built rough barricades, posted sentries, organized watches. But they were still afraid. Elyra could see it in the way the sentries jumped at shadows, in the nervous energy of their camp. "We could rush them," one of the fighters suggested. A young man, eager to prove himself. "We could," Elyra agreed, "and lose 20 people doing it. Or we could be smart." She'd brought something with her, oil-soaked rags wrapped around arrows, a mirror polished to reflect sunlight. Simple tools. "We don't need to fight them," she said. "We just need to make them think I'm about to unleash the fire again." It took an hour to set up. Fighters positioned around the camp at strategic points. Oil poured in key locations. Everything ready. Then Elyra rode forward alone, Ash beside her, her hands deliberately glowing with the faint silver light she could still manage. "Warlords of the Eastern Reach," she called out. "You have one chance to surrender. Lay down your weapons, disperse, and you live. Fight, and you burn like your brothers to the north." Silence from the camp. Then shouting, arguments, fear spreading like wildfire. Elyra raised her hands. The mirror caught sunlight, reflected it into the camp in bright flashes. At the same moment, her fighters lit the oil. Flames erupted around 3 sides of the warlord camp. Not silver fire, just regular fire. But from a distance, in their terrified state, they couldn't tell the difference. The warlords broke. Completely. Utterly. They fled in every direction, abandoning weapons, supplies, everything. Gareth rode up beside Elyra, laughing. That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Fear is a weapon, Elyra said, sometimes more effective than any blade. They let the warlords run, let them spread stories of the woman who commanded fire, who could burn armies with a thought. Let the fear grow. By the time they returned to the stronghold, word had spread. The second warlord group, scattered without a fight. The eastern territories, slowly becoming safe again. Elyra was greeted at the gates by cheering crowds, people reaching out to touch her horse, her cloak, calling her name, children watching with wide eyes, their parents pulling them back but looking hopeful. It was overwhelming, wrong. She wasn't a hero, she was just someone who'd survived and learned to weaponize that survival. But maybe that was enough. That night, another council meeting. This time, Elyra was invited to attend. She stood before the same people who'd watched her exile weeks ago. Some faces had changed. A few of the harsher critics had died in the attacks, been replaced by younger members. But the core remained. Marcus spoke first. The eastern territories are stabilizing. Refugees are starting to return home. The warlord threat is nearly eliminated. Nearly? Elyra asked. The third group is still out there, smaller now, maybe 100 fighters, but they've gone to ground. We don't know where. They'll surface eventually, Elyra said. Desperate people make mistakes. Lydia, the supply master, spoke next. Food stores are recovering, the western farms are producing again. We're not comfortable, but we're no longer starving. Good. Then Seren stood. Elyra had been waiting for this. I have concerns, Seren said. Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. About what happens when the crisis is over. Miss Voss has proven effective in combat, yes, but she's also proven dangerous, unpredictable. What happens when we no longer need a weapon? I'm not a weapon, Elyra said quietly. No? You killed Rakan by burning him from the inside out. You scattered 200 men with fire and theatrics. You've become something that doesn't fit within our laws, our traditions, our understanding of what's possible. Seren's eyes were cold. How do we control something like that? You don't, Elyra said. That's the point. I'm not something to be controlled. I'm someone to work with. Or against. Your choice. That sounds like a threat. It's reality. Elyra stepped forward. For centuries, this kingdom has operated on one principle. Strength through bloodlines, power through shifting, leadership through dominance. And where has that gotten you? Divided packs, dying territories, a king who inherited a throne he was never properly prepared to hold. Kael stiffened but didn't interrupt. I'm offering something different, Elyra continued. A kingdom where power is earned through action, not birth. Where people are valued for what they contribute, not what they can transform into. Where someone like me, someone you called broken, can save all of you and be recognized for it. Recognized how? Marcus asked. What exactly are you proposing? Elyra looked at Kael. He met her eyes, and she saw resignation there. He'd known this moment was coming. I'm proposing that when this crisis ends, Kael steps down, she said. Not in shame, not in defeat, but in recognition that the kingdom needs different leadership for a different future. The council erupted. Absolutely not. This is treason. You can't just demand the crown. Elyra waited for the noise to die down. When it didn't, she raised her hand and let the silver fire flare, just enough to fill the room with light. Silence. I'm not demanding anything, she said quietly. I'm offering a choice. Continue as you have been, fighting the same battles, making the same mistakes. Or try something new, something that scares you, something that might actually work. And if we refuse? Seren's voice was icy. Then I leave. Take Ash. Take anyone who wants to follow me and build something new somewhere else. Elyra lowered her hand, the fire fading. But the warlords will come back. Other threats will emerge, and you'll face them without me. That's blackmail, someone said. That's negotiation, Elyra corrected. I'm not threatening to hurt you. I'm telling you what I will and won't do. The rest is your decision. Kael stood. The council will discuss this privately. Miss Voss, please wait outside. Elyra left, Ash following. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding. She'd just put everything on the line, her position, her safety, possibly her life. The door opened. Gareth slipped out. You're insane, he said. Brilliant. but insane. How's it going in there? About half want to crown you immediately. The other half want to execute you for treason. Kael's trying to find middle ground. And Seren? Gareth's expression darkened. She's pushing hard for exile. Again. Says you're too dangerous to keep around, even if you're useful. She's not wrong. But she's not right either. Gareth crossed his arms. For what it's worth, I'm with you. Whatever happens. Even if it means leaving the stronghold, especially then. This place has needed change for decades. Maybe you're the one to bring it. The door opened again. Marcus this time. They want you back inside, he said. His expression was unreadable. Elyra straightened, took a breath, and walked back into the council chamber. The room was tense, divided. She could see it in the way people positioned themselves. Supporters on one side, opponents on the other, undecided in the middle. Kael stood at the head of the table. The council has reached a decision, he said, or rather, a compromise. Here it comes, Elyra thought. You will retain command of military operations until the warlord threat is completely eliminated, Kael continued. You will be granted a full pardon and restoration of citizenship. You will be recognized as a protector of the kingdom. But, Elyra asked, but the question of succession will be tabled until the crisis ends. At that point, the council will vote on whether to accept your proposal or maintain current leadership. That's not a compromise, Seren said coldly. That's a delay. It's the best we can do, Marcus said. Half this council wants change. Half wants tradition. We need time to see which path is right. Elyra considered it. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was progress. I accept, she said. On one condition. More conditions? Someone groaned. When the vote happens, it's public. Every citizen of this kingdom gets a say, not just the council. True democracy. The room erupted again, but Elyra could see Kael fighting back a smile. Agreed, he said, cutting through the protests. Public vote when the time comes. Seren stood abruptly and walked out, her face a mask of fury. After the meeting dissolved, Kael pulled Elyra aside. You're making enemies, he said. I know, powerful ones. Seren won't forgive this. Neither will the traditional families. I know that too. Kael was quiet for a moment. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's about justice or fairness. What do you actually want? Elyra thought about it. About the girl who'd stood in this hall 6 weeks ago, terrified and broken. About the woman she'd become in the frontier. About the power burning in her blood that she still didn't fully understand. I want to make sure no one else gets thrown away for being different, she said finally. That's all. Everything else. The power. The politics. The crown. It's just means to that end. Kael nodded slowly. I believe you. I'm not sure everyone else will. Then I'll prove it to them. She smiled, tired but determined. I've gotten good at proving people wrong. As she walked through the stronghold that night, people stopped her, thanked her, asked questions, touched her sleeve like she was something sacred. It was uncomfortable. Wrong. She wasn't a saint or a savior, but maybe she could be a catalyst. Maybe that was enough. In her quarters, Ash curled up by the fire while Elyra stared out the window at the Eastern Territories. Somewhere out there, the last warlord group was hiding, planning, waiting. Let them wait. Let them fear. Because Elyra Voss wasn't the broken girl they'd thrown away anymore. She was something new, something powerful, something that would reshape this kingdom whether they liked it or not. And for the first time since her exile, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The last warlord group surfaced 2 weeks later, and when they did, it wasn't with an attack, it was with a hostage. Elyra was in the training yard working through sword forms with Gareth, her body finally strong enough for real combat again, when a runner came sprinting across the courtyard, face pale, boots slipping on the wet stone. Miss Voss, they've taken villagers from the western settlement, 20 people, men, women, children. They're demanding safe passage east in exchange for their lives. Elyra's sword lowered slowly. When? This morning, dawn. They sent a messenger with the terms. He's waiting in the Great Hall now. She didn't run. Running showed panic, and panic was what the warlords wanted. But she walked fast, Ash at her heels, Gareth jogging to keep up, both of them still breathing hard from the training. The messenger was young, couldn't be more than 16, with a black eye that was swollen half shut and hands that shook when he held out the parchment. His clothes were torn, blood on his shirt. Kael was already there, reading the message, his face dark as a storm cloud. "They want free passage to the eastern border," he said without preamble, not looking up from the parchment. "Supplies for a month, weapons, horses, and a guarantee that we won't pursue them. In exchange for 20 farmers," Elyra finished, taking the parchment from his hand. "Let me see it." The message was crude, written in rough script with what looked like charcoal, but the threat was clear as daylight. "Give us what we want or they die. 1 every hour starting at noon until you agree. We'll send you the bodies." "How long ago did this arrive?" Elyra asked, looking at the messenger directly. "An hour, maybe less." His voice cracked on the words. "My sister's one of the hostages, Emma. She's only 14. Please, they said. They said they'd start with the children if we didn't deliver the message fast enough." "Where are they holding them?" "The old mill, 3 miles west in the valley near the river bend. They've barricaded it, posted guards on all sides. I counted maybe 30 fighters total, but there could be more inside." Elyra handed the parchment back to Kael, her mind already working through possibilities, angles of approach, likely traps. "We're going to get them." "It's a trap," Kael said flatly. "Obviously a trap. They want you to come. Want to draw you out where they can kill you in some ambush they've spent days planning. Probably, but we're still going." "Elyra, those are our people, Kael." She met his eyes, her voice firm. "Farmers, children, people who've already lost everything to this war. People who trusted us to protect them. We don't negotiate with warlords. We don't let them dictate terms. We end them." Seren appeared from somewhere in the back of the hall, her face tight, her hands clasped in front of her like she was restraining herself from reaching for a weapon. "If you go charging in there like some kind of hero, you'll get those hostages killed. This requires delicate handling, negotiation, strategy." "Delicate?" Elyra turned to face her fully. "You want to negotiate? Give them supplies and safe passage so they can regroup somewhere else and attack another settlement? Kill more innocent people? I want to not throw away lives on a rescue mission that will probably fail," Seren shot back. Her voice was controlled, but there was an edge underneath. "You're not invincible, Elyra. That display on the battlefield nearly killed you. What happens if you go out there, burn yourself out again, and this time you don't wake up? What happens to those hostages then? Then someone else saves them, but I'm not sitting here doing nothing. That's not what I'm suggesting. Then what are you suggesting?" Elyra took a step closer. "Spell it out, because it sounds like you're saying we should let those people die to avoid risk." Seren's jaw tightened. "I'm saying we need to think this through, plan properly, not react emotionally. Sometimes emotion is the right reaction." Elyra turned away from her, dismissing the argument. "Gareth, get me 20 fighters. Fast, quiet. People who can handle themselves in close quarters. We leave in 15 minutes. "I'm coming with you," Kael said. "No, you're not. You're the king. You stay here where it's safe, where you can coordinate defenses if this goes wrong." "I'm the king, which means I don't take orders from you." His voice had that alpha edge again, the command that made wolves instinctively want to submit. "Those are my people too. My responsibility. I'm coming." They stared at each other for a long moment. The hall had gone quiet, everyone watching this confrontation, waiting to see who would bend. Finally, Elyra nodded. "Fine, but you follow my lead. This isn't a pitched battle where you can rely on strength and numbers. It's a surgical strike. Precision over power." "Understood." "And if I say run, you run. No arguments, no heroics. Clear?" Kael's jaw worked, but he nodded. "Clear." As they prepared to leave, the young messenger grabbed Elyra's sleeve. "Please, my sister, please bring her back." Elyra looked at his desperate face, at the hope and terror mixing there. "What's your name?" "Finn." "Finn, I can't promise you anything, but I can promise I'll try. That's all anyone can do." He nodded, tears streaming down his face, and let go of her sleeve. The old mill sat in a valley surrounded by sparse trees and open ground that had been stripped bare by years of logging. Terrible defensive position if you were trying to hold it long term. Perfect if you wanted clear sightlines to spot approaching enemies. Elyra and her team approached from the north, using what little tree cover remained. Kael was beside her,
moving surprisingly quietly for someone his size. Gareth and Mara flanked them, 18 other fighters spread out in a loose formation that could collapse into a tight unit or scatter depending on what they encountered. The afternoon sun was harsh, no clouds to provide cover. Elyra could feel sweat running down her back, her heart beating steady and strong. The silver fire was there in her chest, warm and ready, but she was trying not to rely on it, trying to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she could lead without burning. "I count 6 guards outside," Mara whispered. She was lying flat on a ridge, looking through a gap in the rocks. She had the best eyes of all of them, could spot movement at distances that seemed impossible. 2 on the north side by that broken cart, 3 on the south near the water wheel, 1 on the roof, probably more inside with the hostages. "Can you take the guards quietly?" Elyra asked. 3 of them for sure, maybe 4 if we're lucky and they're not paying attention. Mara paused, calculating. "But the one on the roof has a clear view of the whole valley. We take him out. Everyone inside knows we're coming. Then we leave him for last. Take out the ground guards. Move fast before Roof Guy can react." Elyra looked at her team. They were scared. She could see it in the way they gripped their weapons too tight, the way some of them kept licking their lips. But they were here. They'd volunteered. "When you hear my signal, move fast and quiet. No heroics. We're here to get the hostages out, not win glory." Mara and 3 other scouts, all of them light on their feet, all of them deadly with knives, melted into the undergrowth, moving like ghosts. Elyra waited, counting heartbeats, watching the mill through the gaps in the rocks. The building was old, half collapsed on one side, the water wheel broken and listing at an angle. Through the gaps in the walls, she could see movement, shadows, figures that were probably the hostages, bound and terrified. She felt the silver fire stir in her chest, still weak compared to what she'd unleashed on the battlefield, still unreliable, but there, waiting. A bird call. Mara's signal. 3 of the exterior guards were down, their throats cut, bodies dragged into the undergrowth where they wouldn't be spotted immediately. "Now," Elyra said. They moved as one unit, fast and silent, across the open ground. The remaining guards saw them coming. One started to shout, his mouth opening wide. But Gareth's arrow took him in the throat, and he went down choking. Kael's blade opened another guard's belly before the man could draw his weapon. The 3rd guard managed to get his sword up, but one of the twins, Elyra still couldn't tell them apart, drove a spear through his chest. The guard on the roof was turning, his mouth opening to shout a warning. Mara's 2nd arrow took him through the eye. He toppled backward off the roof with a wet thud. Then they were at the mill, stacking up beside the door. Elyra could hear voices inside now, rough laughter, someone crying, a child's voice, high and terrified. Someone else telling them to shut up. She looked at Kael. He nodded, his face set and grim. She kicked the door open. The inside of the mill was chaos and dim light filtering through gaps in the walls. 20 hostages bound with rope in the center of the room, sitting on the dirt floor, surrounded by warlords who were already scrambling for weapons. Some were half asleep, caught off guard. Others were eating, bowls of something that smelled like burned meat scattering as they jumped up. One of them, a scarred woman with gray hair pulled back in a braid, had a knife to a child's throat. "Stop!" the woman shouted. Her voice was rough, like she'd spent years breathing smoke. "Stop right there, or I kill the boy." Elyra froze. Everyone froze. The child was maybe 8 years old, tears streaming down his face, trying to be brave and failing completely. The knife pressed hard enough that a thin line of blood appeared on his skin, bright red against pale flesh. "Drop your weapons," the scarred woman said. She had scars everywhere, across her face, down her arms, probably all over her body. A lifetime of violence written in scar tissue. "All of you, drop them now or he dies." Elyra's mind raced through possibilities. 30 warlords, most of them armed now, most of them between her team and the hostages. 20 innocent people who would die the moment fighting started. Her people were good, but not good enough to kill 30 fighters before one of them murdered a hostage in revenge. She needed a different approach. "You're Kara," Elyra said. She'd heard the name from interrogated prisoners, from reports. "Rakan's second in command. You were supposed to take over when he died." "And I did," Kara said. Her eyes were hard, calculating. "What's left of it, anyway? Not much of an army anymore, is it?" "Then you know you're beaten. Your leader's dead. Your army's scattered across 3 territories. Your cause, whatever it was, is lost. Elyra took a slow step forward, hands visible and empty, no weapons. This doesn't have to end with more death. You're right. It doesn't. Kara pressed the knife harder. The boy whimpered, a sound that cut through Elyra like glass. Give us safe passage and supplies like we asked for, and everyone walks away. Simple trade. You know I can't do that.
Then the boy dies. Then the girl beside him. Then another. And another until you agree or there's no one left to save. Kara's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. Your choice. Elyra took another step forward. She could feel the silver fire building in her chest, could feel it wanting to be unleashed, wanting to burn everything in this room until only ash remained. But fire wouldn't work here. Too many innocents too close together. Too much risk. What if I offered you something better? She said. Kara's eyes narrowed. Like what? Your head on a pike? That might be worth something. A new start. Land in the Eastern Territories, the rocky sections we're not using. Amnesty for you and your fighters. A chance to build something instead of burning it down. Elyra kept her voice level, reasonable. You could have lives, real ones. Not running from settlement to settlement, stealing to survive. You're lying. I'm not. But the offer expires in 30 seconds. After that, we fight. And you know how that ends. You've heard what I did to Rakan, what I can do. She let a flicker of silver fire dance across her knuckles. You really want to test it? Kara looked around at her fighters. They were exhausted. Elyra could see it now in the harsh light. Underfed, covered in poorly healed wounds, wearing clothes that were more patches than original fabric. These weren't hardened warriors. They were survivors who'd followed the wrong leader and were now paying the price. Why? Kara asked. The knife was still at the boy's throat, but it hadn't pressed harder. Why offer mercy? We killed your people, burned your settlements. Why not just slaughter us and be done with it? Because I'm tired of killing people who don't need to die, Elyra said honestly. The words felt raw, true. You fought for Rakan because he promised you something. Power, wealth, land, whatever. But he's dead, and that promise died with him. Now you're fighting because you don't know what else to do, because you're scared of what happens if you stop. She took another step, close enough now that she could see the doubt in Kara's eyes, could see the exhaustion written in every line of her face. I'm giving you another option, Elyra continued. Put down the knife, let the hostages go, and I'll personally guarantee, on my word, on my power, on everything I am, that you and your people get a chance to live without running or fighting or wondering which day will be your last. She's lying, one of the other warlords said, a big man with a broken nose and scars across his knuckles. They'll execute us the moment we surrender. That's what victors do. Then watch. Elyra turned to Kael without taking her eyes fully off Kara. Order it. Full amnesty for anyone who surrenders now. Land grants in the Eastern Territories. Protection under kingdom law. Kael stared at her. She could see him processing, see him realizing what she was asking. This was a huge risk. This could backfire spectacularly. But he trusted her. She could see it in his eyes. By my authority as Alpha King, he said, his voice carrying through the mill with that commanding tone that made people listen. I grant full amnesty to any warlord who lays down arms now, effective immediately. You'll be given land. Not the best land, I'll be honest, but workable land. Supplies to get started, and a chance to rebuild your lives as citizens of this kingdom. This offer is genuine. You have my word as king. Silence. Long and heavy, broken only by the sound of someone crying softly among the hostages. Then Kara lowered the knife. She did it slowly, like her arm weighed 1,000 pounds. The boy didn't move at first, too terrified. Then he ran, sobbing, into his mother's arms across the room. The other hostages started crying too, relief and terror mixing together in sounds that were barely human. We surrender, Kara said. She dropped the knife, kicked it away so it skittered across the dirt floor. All of us. We surrender. One by one, the other warlords set down their weapons. Swords, axes, crude spears, they clattered to the ground. Some of the warlords looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. Others looked broken, defeated. A few looked angry, resentful, but not enough to keep fighting. Gareth and his fighters moved in carefully, securing the weapons, checking the hostages for injuries, cutting ropes. Elyra watched it all happen, feeling something unclench in her chest that she hadn't realized was tight. No one had died. Not today. Not here. Kael moved to stand beside her, close enough that his shoulder almost touched hers. That was a gamble. Everything's a gamble. You just promised kingdom land to former enemies without consulting the council. They're going to be furious. You backed me up. I did. He was quiet for a moment, watching as the hostages were freed, as parents grabbed children and held them tight. You know what this means, right? Every criminal, every rebel, every raiding party is going to expect the same treatment. Let them. If it means fewer people dying, I'll take that trade. As they rode back to the stronghold with the freed hostages and surrendered warlords, 28 in total, 2 having died in the initial assault outside, Elyra felt Ash press against her leg where she rode. She looked down. His yellow eyes were proud, satisfied. I know, she murmured so quietly that only he could hear. We did good today. The reaction to the amnesty was exactly as Kael predicted. The council meeting the next day was a shouting match that went on for 3 hours. Half the room was furious that Elyra had offered mercy to enemies of the kingdom who deserved the rope. The other half was cautiously supportive, seeing the strategic value in ending the conflict without further bloodshed, and showing that the kingdom could be merciful as well as strong. Seren was the loudest voice of opposition, her arguments sharp and relentless. You've set a dangerous precedent, she said, standing at her place at the council table, her hands flat on the wood like she wanted to flip it over. Every raiding party, every rebel group, every criminal with a grudge will expect the same treatment. Where does it end? When do we draw the line? It ends when people stop seeing violence as their only option, Elyra replied. She was standing at the front of the room, Kael seated to one side in a position that was technically supportive, but also allowed him to distance himself if this went badly. The council was arrayed in judgment before her, 15 members, their faces ranging from openly hostile to cautiously curious. Kara and her fighters didn't want to be warlords. They didn't wake up one day and decide to burn villages for fun. They wanted to survive. We gave them a better way to do that. And if they betray us, Seren's voice was sharp enough to cut. If they regroup in 6 months and attack again, if they use our mercy as weakness, then we deal with it. But I don't think they will. I saw their faces yesterday. They're tired, done. They want peace as much as we do. You can't know that. No, I can't. But I can make an educated guess based on what I saw. And I'd rather bet on mercy and be wrong than bet on cruelty and be right. Marcus spoke up from his position at the table. The Eastern Territories have unclaimed land, rocky sections that are difficult to farm but workable with effort and the right techniques. We could establish a settlement there, monitor them closely. If they prove themselves over time, we integrate them fully into the kingdom. If they prove untrustworthy, we exile them again, this time permanently. That's too much trust, Seren said. Too much risk for too little gain. All leadership is risk, Kael said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He'd been mostly silent up to this point, letting Elyra make her case. Every decision we make could fail, could lead to disaster. We can plan, we can strategize, we can try to account for every variable, but in the end, we're making our best guess and hoping we're right. That's what it means to lead. He stood, moved to stand beside Elyra. The gesture was deliberate, symbolic, a king backing someone else's play. Miss Voss made a call in the field that saved 20 innocent lives and ended the war without further bloodshed, he continued. His voice was firm, carrying the weight of authority. I supported that call. I still support it. The council can vote to override me if they want. That's within your rights. But I'm telling you now, as someone who's led this kingdom for 5 years, this was the right decision. Seren's face went pale, then flushed red. You're choosing her over the council? Over tradition? Over everything we've built? I'm choosing what's right over what's comfortable. There's a difference. The vote was close, agonizingly close. 15-12 in favor of honoring the amnesty. Seren abstained, standing and walking out of the chamber before the final count was even finished, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. After the meeting dissolved, Lydia, the thin woman who managed supplies, pulled Elyra aside in the corridor outside the council chamber. You're making powerful enemies, she said quietly. Her voice was concerned, but not unkind. Saren's not going to forgive this. Neither will some of the older families who think you're undermining centuries of tradition. I know. Is it worth it? Making yourself a target? Elyra thought about the boy with the knife to his throat, about Kara's exhausted face when she'd lowered the weapon, about the choice between revenge and mercy, between what felt satisfying and what was right. Yes, she said. It is. If being right means making enemies, I'll make enemies. The public vote on succession happened 3 weeks later. The war was officially over. The warlords were either dead, scattered beyond the kingdom's borders, or living in the new eastern settlement under careful watch and regular inspections. The territories were rebuilding, slowly but steadily. Refugees were returning home to find their houses burned, but their land still there, still workable. Life was returning to something like normal. But the question remained, hanging over everything like a storm cloud. Who would lead them forward? The vote was scheduled for midday, held in the Great Hall initially, but it quickly became clear that the hall was too small to hold everyone who wanted to participate. So they opened the courtyard, the training grounds, every available space in the stronghold. Runners had been sent to the outer territories days ago, carrying ballot boxes and instructions. Everyone who lived in the kingdom, shifter or not, noble or common, old or young, got a say. Elyra stood on the platform where Kael usually sat for formal occasions, looking out at the sea of faces, thousands of them. More people than she'd ever seen in one place, more than she'd thought the kingdom even had. They packed the courtyard, spilled out into the streets beyond, climbed onto walls and rooftops to get a better view. Kael stood beside her. He'd chosen not to campaign, not to argue his case or make promises. Just let his record speak for itself. 5 years of stable leadership, military victories, alliances maintained. It was a strong record, objectively. Elyra had done the same. No speeches about what she would do, no grand promises about the future, just the truth of what she'd done and who she'd become. Let people judge based on that. Marcus stood at the front as vote master, chosen because he was respected by both traditional and reform factions. He'd spent the morning overseeing the count with a team of witnesses from both sides, making sure everything was fair and transparent. The rules are simple, he announced, his voice magically amplified somehow. Elyra didn't know how, some technique she'd have to learn. To reach everyone in the massive crowd. Each citizen votes for who they want to lead. King Kael Draven, who has served faithfully for 5 years, or Elyra Voss, who saved us from the warlords and offers a new vision. The majority wins. No debate after the fact, no appeals. The people decide and we all honor that decision. The voting had taken hours. People filing forward throughout the morning, casting their choice into sealed boxes, then waiting while runners brought votes from the distant territories. Some people had traveled for days just to cast their vote in person, not trusting anyone else with something this important. Elyra watched it all with a strange detachment. This moment would define her future, would determine whether everything she'd fought for would continue or end. But she felt calm, ready for whatever came. Ash lay at her feet, completely unbothered by the crowds, by the noise, by the weight of history happening around him. Gareth stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes constantly moving, watching for threats. He didn't trust crowds, didn't trust moments when everyone's attention was focused one direction. Mara was somewhere in the crowd, similarly vigilant. Saren was absent. She had left the stronghold 2 days ago, taking a handful of loyal supporters with her, maybe 20 people in total. No one knew where she'd gone, though rumors said north toward the territories that had always been most traditional, most resistant to change. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Marcus stepped forward with a sealed scroll in his hands. "The votes are counted," he said. The crowd went instantly silent, thousands of people holding their breath at once. "Verified by witnesses from both factions and sealed with the council mark. The people have spoken." He broke the seal, unrolled the scroll. His face was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. For King Kael Draven, 42% of the votes cast. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Surprise. Kael's supporters looking worried, exchanging glances. For Elyra Voss, 58%. The crowd erupted, some sections cheering, shouting, celebrating like their side had won a battle. Other sections protesting, shouting objections, looking angry and betrayed. It was chaos, thousands of voices all trying to be heard at once. Elyra stood frozen, the numbers echoing in her head. 58%. Not a landslide, not overwhelming, but a clear majority. More than half the kingdom had chosen her. They'd actually chosen her. Kael stepped forward, raised both hands for silence. It took several minutes. People were too worked up, too emotional, but eventually the noise died down to a low murmur. "The people have spoken," he said. His voice was steady, calm, showing none of the disappointment he must have felt. "And I will honor their choice, as I swore to do. Elyra Voss is now the rightful leader of this kingdom." He turned to her, and to her complete shock, he knelt, one knee on the stone platform, head bowed, the formal position of fealty. "I pledge my loyalty and my service," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, the traditional words of succession, "for as long as you'll have it, for as long as you lead." Elyra stared at him, at this man who'd thrown her away, who'd condemned her to death, who was now kneeling before her in front of thousands of witnesses. Part of her wanted to let him stay there, wanted to savor this reversal, but that wasn't who she was anymore. She reached down, gripped his shoulder firmly, pulled him to his feet with more force than was strictly necessary. "I don't want people kneeling to me," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, making sure her voice carried. "I want partners, advisors, people who will tell me when I'm wrong and help me figure out how to do better. I want colleagues, not subjects." She looked out at the crowd, at thousands of faces watching her, waiting to see what kind of leader she would be. "I'm not a perfect leader," she continued. "I'm not even sure I'm a good one yet. I'm going to make mistakes, big ones probably. But I promise you this. I'll fight for every single one of you, not just the strong ones, not just the ones who can shift or claim pure bloodlines or trace their ancestry back 10 generations. All of you, every person in this kingdom, from the wealthiest noble to the poorest farmer, matters, has value, deserves protection and opportunity." She paused, letting that sink in. "Because a kingdom is only as strong as its weakest member," she said. "And I won't let anyone be thrown away. Not ever again." The cheering started again, louder this time, more sustained. People chanting her name, crying, embracing each other. Some were still angry. She could see it in pockets of the crowd. People with arms crossed, faces set in disapproval. But they were fewer than before, and even some of them looked thoughtful rather than hostile. Kael leaned close, spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "You realize you just committed to an impossible standard?" "Good," Elyra said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I do my best work when people think I'll fail." The coronation happened a week later. Not a traditional ceremony, Elyra had refused the elaborate ritual that usually accompanied the transfer of power, the hours of ceremonial blessings and formal oaths and symbolic gestures. Instead, it was simple, public, honest. She stood in the great hall, the same place she'd been rejected 2 months ago. Had it really only been 2 months? Wearing simple clothes instead of royal finery. No elaborate gown, no ceremonial armor, just practical clothes that she could actually move in. Ash beside her, a constant presence. Her people, Gareth, Mara, the twins, Marcus, Lydia, even some of the former warlords from the eastern settlement, standing witness in a loose circle. The hall was packed with citizens who'd crowded in to see history happen. The doors were open so people in the courtyard could see too. Marcus held out the crown. It was old, older than anyone knew, silver and iron intertwined in a pattern that looked almost organic, embedded with stones that caught the light and threw it back in strange colors. "Do you swear to lead with wisdom?" he asked. The traditional words, the question every king and queen had answered for centuries. "I swear to lead with honesty," Elyra said, changing the script deliberately. "Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Do you swear to protect the kingdom?" "I swear to protect the people. All of them. The kingdom is just land and buildings without the people who live in it." "Do you swear to uphold the ancient laws?" Elyra paused. This was the moment, the line she was crossing. "I swear to create new laws," she said clearly. "Better ones. Laws that serve everyone, not just the powerful. Laws that protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Laws that recognize that power comes in many forms, not just the ability to shift." Marcus hesitated for just a moment.
Then he smiled. Actually smiled, something she'd rarely seen him do.
Close enough. He placed the crown on her head. It was heavier than she expected, the metal cold against her skin, even through her hair. The weight was real, physical, a constant reminder of responsibility. The crowd cheered, the sound echoing off the stone walls until it was almost deafening. But Elyra barely heard them. She was looking at the spot where she'd stood 8 weeks ago. Barefoot, terrified, broken, called defective and worthless and thrown away like garbage. So much had changed, and yet some things remained the same. She was still the girl who didn't fit their definitions, who challenged their traditions, who made people uncomfortable just by existing. But now she had the power to change things, to make sure no one else had to endure what she'd endured, to build something better. That night, Elyra stood alone on the highest tower of the stronghold, looking out at the kingdom she now led. The lights of settlements dotted the darkness like fallen stars. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping, trusting that she would keep them safe. The weight of that trust was almost crushing. Ash was beside her as always, his warmth steady and real and uncomplicated. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn, knew the sound. "Can't sleep?" Kael asked. "Too much to think about." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, both of them looking out at the same view. They were quiet for a long time, just watching the lights, the dark expanse of the territories beyond. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "You've apologized already. Multiple times. Not properly. Not for all of it." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight he looked younger, more vulnerable. "I was weak. I let Seren manipulate me, let my fear of what the council would think override my own judgment. You deserved better than that. And I failed you. Completely." Elyra was quiet for a moment, processing. "You did fail me, but you also stood beside me when it mattered, backed my decisions even when they were risky, gave up your crown without trying to undermine the vote or stage some kind of coup." "It was never really mine," Kael said. "I inherited it because my father died and I was the oldest son. That's not earning something. That's just existing in the right place at the right time. And what I did? Burning my way through an army? Is that earning it? You gave people hope. You showed them that power doesn't have to come from bloodlines, that being different doesn't mean being less." He paused. "Yeah, I'd say you earned it." They were quiet again, comfortable this time. "What will you do now?" Elyra asked. "You could leave. Start over somewhere new, somewhere no one knows you as the king who lost his crown." "I could, but I think I'll stay. Help however I can if you'll let me." He paused. "As a friend, maybe, if that's allowed for former kings and current queens." Elyra looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion that had been there for months finally starting to fade, saw someone who'd carried weight alone for too long and was relieved, actually relieved, to set it down. "Friend works," she said. Another long silence. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain. "What about Seren?" Kael asked quietly. "Any word on where she went?" "North, according to the last scouts. She's trying to rally the traditional families, convince them to refuse my authority. Says I'm a usurper, a tyrant in the making." "Will they listen?" "Some will. The ones who benefited most from the old system, who have the most to lose from change. Others won't. They'll wait and see, judge me by results." Elyra shrugged. "But that's a problem for tomorrow. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to be a leader who doesn't burn out in 6 months." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you actually care. Not about the crown or the power or the prestige, about the people." He smiled slightly. "That makes all the difference." After Kael left, Elyra stayed on the tower for hours, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast darkness. She thought about the frontier, about the cave where she'd nearly died, about the woman made of fire in her dreams who'd promised that exile was just the first crack in the seal. The silver fire stirred in her chest, warm and steady. Not gone. Never gone. Part of her now as essential as breathing. "We did it," she whispered to Ash, to herself, to the ghost of the girl she used to be. Ash's tail thumped once against the stone. Agreement. In the weeks and months that followed, Elyra worked to reshape the kingdom, piece by careful piece. She established councils in every territory where citizens could voice concerns directly, where decisions weren't just handed down from nobles but discussed and debated. Created laws that protected those who couldn't shift, who didn't have supernatural abilities, who'd been marginalized under the old system. Opened the military to volunteers instead of just those with pack bloodlines. Found that farmers and craftsmen could fight just as fiercely as born warriors when they were defending something they believed in. She faced resistance, constant grinding resistance. Nobles who'd benefited from the old ways and saw her reforms as theft. Traditional families who saw her reforms as attacks on their heritage, on everything they'd built over generations. Seren's faction in the north, constantly agitating, sending letters, spreading rumors, trying to undermine her authority. But more people supported her than opposed her. The farmers whose lives she'd saved. The children growing up in a kingdom where being different wasn't a death sentence. The former warlords who'd been given a second chance and were working harder than anyone to prove they deserved it. 6 months after her coronation, a young girl appeared at the stronghold gates. She was maybe 12, thin and nervous, with eyes that didn't quite focus right and a tremor in her hands. "I can't shift," she told the guards, her voice barely audible. "Never could. My family sent me here because they heard the queen was like me. I wanted to see if it was true." The guards didn't turn her away, didn't laugh or mock. They brought her inside, gave her water and food, and then brought her to Elyra. Elyra was in the training yard when they arrived, teaching combat forms to a mixed group of shifters and non-shifters, showing them how speed and technique could overcome raw strength, how everyone had something to contribute. The girl stared at her, at the crown that Elyra rarely wore, preferring to leave it in her quarters most days, at the silver fire that occasionally flickered around her hands when she demonstrated techniques, at the way people listened to her, respected her. "Is it true?" the girl asked. Her voice was shaking. "You really couldn't shift?" "Still can't," Elyra said, setting down her practice sword and kneeling so they were eye level. "But I found something else, something different, something mine. What if I never find anything? What if I'm just normal? What if I'm always going to be weak?" Elyra reached out, gently touched the girl's shoulder. "Then you're normal, and that's enough. You don't need special powers to matter. You don't need to shift to belong. You just need to be yourself, and the rest will follow." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really, I promise. Can I stay here? Can you teach me?" "Yes. We'll find a place for you, figure out what you're good at, help you become whoever you want to be." Watching the girl walk away with one of the trainers, lighter, hopeful, transformed not by power, but by simple acceptance, Elyra felt something settle deep in her chest. This was why she'd fought, why she'd survived, why she'd come back when it would have been easier to disappear into the frontier and never return. Not for revenge, not for power, but for this. For every kid who'd been told they weren't enough, who'd been thrown away or cast aside or made to feel broken. She couldn't save everyone, couldn't fix everything. The kingdom still had problems, would always have problems. Leadership was messy, complicated, full of impossible choices and compromises and situations where every option was bad and you just had to pick the least terrible one. But she could make it better. One decision at a time, one life at a time, one person who needed to hear that they mattered. That night, Elyra stood in the Great Hall, alone except for Ash. The same hall where she'd been rejected, where she'd been called nothing, where her life had been torn apart. She raised her hand and let the silver fire come. It filled the room with light, bright and beautiful and entirely her own. Not borrowed, not inherited, not given. Hers. "They were wrong," she said to the empty hall, to the memory of the girl she used to be. "We were never broken. We were just waiting to be set free." The fire danced in her palm, casting shifting shadows on the ancient stone walls. And for the first time since the exile, maybe the first time in her entire life, Elyra felt completely at peace. She'd turned rejection into revolution, humiliation into healing, pain into power, not the destructive kind that crushed and conquered, but the kind that lifted others up, that made space for people who'd never had space before. And if that wasn't enough to redefine what strength meant, what leadership looked like, what it meant to be whole instead of broken, then nothing would be. Elyra Voss, the girl marked as nobody, had become the queen who changed everything. Not because she was perfect. She made mistakes constantly, misjudged situations, pushed too hard or not hard enough. Not because she never doubted herself. She spent many nights on that tower wondering if she was leading them all toward disaster. But because she refused to let anyone else feel as worthless as she once had. Because she remembered what it was like to be thrown away and swore no one under her rule would experience that. Because she understood that the strongest kingdoms weren't built on dominance and blood purity, but on recognizing the value in everyone. And in the end, that made all the difference. The silver fire blazed brighter, filling the great hall with light that spilled out through the windows into the night beyond, and Elyra smiled. She'd finally found her way home. Not to a place that had rejected her, but to a future she'd built with her own burning hands. A future where being different was strength, where mercy wasn't weakness, where power served the people instead of the other way around. And it was more than enough. It was everything.